Rest assured, Carol, we will figure out what makes you different.
Figure it out, why?
So we can fix it. So you can join us.
Today, we're diving deep into the latest creation from the man who needs no introduction, and that is Vince Gilligan. This 4-time Emmy-winning producer and the mastermind behind one of my all-time favorite shows in Breaking Bad, and one of, if not the greatest prequel series in Better Call Saul, is taking us back to his roots. 30 years after getting his start in television on The X-Files, Gilligan is now the showrunner and creator of the new Apple TV Plus sci-fi drama by the name of Pluribus. Now, for those of you who are like me and who have been eagerly awaiting this show since it was announced back in 2022, you at least know the basic idea of the show, despite the marketing being very extremely vague. But for anyone out there learning about Pluribus for the first time, here's a quick crash course. Pluribus is set in Albuquerque because of course it is. It's the same iconic location of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, but it has nothing to do with those shows. The show follows Carol, a New Mexico book writer who is seamlessly the only person unaffected by a mysterious global virus. And here's the kicker. The virus creates this psychological effect of making everyone happy.
I just want you to be happy.
Now, immediately the title itself gives us a sense of what we're about to experience. E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many, one. It's also the motto of the United States, referring to the union formed by separate states, often seen on US currency. But notice how Gilligan spells it. That subtle change replacing the I with the number 1 is critical, as it hints towards one, a hive mind presented towards the end of this episode. The title also hints at a world where being unique, being an individual, might get eaten up by this contagious happiness. It's about a collective state, but a fundamental shift in the reality that only the most miserable person can fix. And here's the classic Vince Gilligan irony. The biggest threat isn't sadness or despair, but a universal good vibe we know as happiness. Gilligan is probably gonna make us question if being truly happy means losing yourself, or if true happiness is even possible when someone's forced into it. It's control, identity, and the dark side of seamlessly positive force, all classic Gilligan themes. Alright, now that we got the context out of the way, it's time to break down and discuss this first episode. And yes, spoilers ahead, if you all haven't watched it yet, you all have been warned. We open with a countdown, 439 days, 19 hours, 56 minutes, and 2 seconds. As a speeding truck arrives near a station collecting data from satellites. A man hops out of his truck and immediately calls BS on some readings that are apparently freaking wide and periodic. These signals they're analyzing are coming from 600 light years away and could be extraterrestrial. This rare out-of-space signals creates a buzz amongst other astronomers. They share what they believe it could be, as one of them discovers it could form a Morse code split 4 ways into frequencies. A detail we learn more about later. Now, the two men we initially met talk about who or what could have sent this very complex message, but the one guy who found it believes he knows exactly what it might be. Fast forward to another countdown, 71 days, 13 hours, 20 minutes, and 59 seconds, which is a little over a year since the message was originally received. We see a team of researchers and scientists all wearing different colored scrubs to represent their individual expertise. As we'll later discover, they're all working on creating an RNA, sampling and testing on rats, attempting to replicate the message. Now, for any scientific researchers out there watching this breakdown or watching this episode, let's take a look at this board in this scene. There's information about plagues and various combinations of viruses that affect most humans at a young age, for example, HHV6. Now, for those out there that are much smarter than me, does any of this make sense story-wise? Now, we'll later learn in this episode that these scientists and doctors are indeed recreating the signal into what becomes the happiness virus, but let me know in the comments if there's anything that I should be taking away from this board that might be important for the rest of the story that I might have missed. Now we cut to a book reading at a Barnes & Noble. Here we meet our hero of the story, Carol, wearing a green sweater. I want you all to pay attention to the frequency of the use of particular colors in this episode. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Carol's a historical romance book writer promoting the 4th book of her series, The Blood Song of Wakaro.
Waikaro, please, the twins of Waikaro.
We see that Carol has a very loyal fan base who love her and love her books even more. But it's here that we can see during her book signing and throughout these interactions with her fans, you can see the mask Carol has on. It's one of pretending to be happy and proud of her work, and it is slowly wearing thin. Now later in the car with her manager, who we soon discover is her wife by the name of Helen, it's here we see Carol's true feelings on her work.
That was quite a send-off. I'm sorry, should I know who you are?
Depends. You a big fan of mindless crap?
To me, this is a great example of how this show will hopefully explore the idea behind pretending to be happy. We see Carol creates these books that aren't creatively fulfilling for her, but they make other people happy. It's like others are controlling her happiness, which in my mind is a direct parallel to what we see with the happiness virus later on. But it's also important to note, through the BS of these books, Helen is Carol's support system, the one thing that truly keeps her happy, and the contrast is key. Cut to 29 days, 23 hours, 49 minutes and 56 seconds, a little over a month since we last saw the researchers in their labs. As we're now inside the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases. Now inside we meet two doctors who have been toiling for 8 months on a project that for them has been a major disappointment. Now their goal was to create a sequence that encodes a lysogenic virus. And their test subjects happens to be rats, which shares a surprisingly 92% DNA to us humans, which by the way, may be key to what happens to them shortly. As the doctors prepare to gas what they believe are expendable rats, I couldn't help but to make this parallel. Here are these doctors in a position of undeniable power control, ending lives that have served their purpose. Their helplessness mirrors the very fate awaiting the majority of mankind, who will soon have no control over the virus that takes a hold of them. Now, Dr. Jan notices that one of the rats appears unexpectedly dead. Now, as she's showing curiosity or even empathy, we see the doctor removes her gloves to check on the rat's heartbeat. Now, just as she might be thinking it's faking, the rat bites her, breaking the skin as it scurries off. This appearing dead or actually dying symptom, remember it because we'll see it again in others who are affected later. Jan moves to disinfect her wound, but immediately she's stopped because she has this violent seizure. Dr. D, horrified, shoves her into the safety shower. As the water comes down on her, Jan slowly stops shaking, appearing to return to normal. But then we see it, a slow, unsettling smile spreads across her face. Cut to security guard Mel, who earlier thoughtfully brought donuts for the entire staff. Now we watch as Dr. Jan approaches him, and in a moment that's both intimate and terrifying, she kisses him. This is our first clear indication of how the virus spreads, rapidly and effectively through saliva, particularly via kissing. We then see Dr. D mirroring Jan, planting a smile on his face and affecting the cleaning man with a kiss. This whole setup immediately reminded me of the horror film Smile. We watch as the now infected staff, all smiling, collect samples from their mouths, preparing petri dishes, leaving little small drawn smiles inside of them. And in a final act of mass contamination, we see Dr. Jan licking the very donuts Mel brought for everyone, as the stage for a global pandemic of insidious joy is now set. We cut to day 0, hour 3, minute 6, 34 seconds in to another month later since the virus has officially been activated and spread. We're now back with Carol, who's returned home from another book tour, and she's at her local airport as she has her wife make sure to switch out her books from the bottom shelf to the top row at the airport bookstore. Now, as they're leaving the airport and they're now in the garage, we see that Helen refuses to let Carol drive after having a couple drinks. Seeing the breathalyzer in the car suggests a history with alcohol and perhaps even recovery from Carol. Now, something I wanted to point out is Helen also picked up some gum from the store. Could this be another vector for the virus, perhaps through contaminated products? Or maybe it got in the water source at some point, or it's being spread through the same way it was found via sound waves. Now at a bar, celebrating their best book tour ever, we see more of Carol's resentment towards her books and calling her fans a bunch of dummies.
Oh, how I hate all those paying customers showering me with love and respect. And why do I have to make so much money?
Now, I would be remiss not to bring this up again, but I want to mention the importance of the different colors heavily used in this episode. From seeing colors like yellow, which was key in the promotion of the show, symbolizing happiness. We see a ton of greens, we see pinks, but it's the color purple that takes center stage in this episode and it's mentioned repeatedly. Whether we saw the doctors wearing purple in their labs, we saw Carol's book signing and her pen was purple, even the sand in her books is purple. Now, if you all are familiar with the color theory, the color purple can mean things like royalty, mystery, transformation, wisdom, or even mourning. There has to be a reason for these colors used, especially the color purple. Again, considering this show's deep themes and tackling the human emotions, this choice doesn't seem like an accident. To me, it hints at things like profound changes, hidden knowledge, and a power dynamic that's both alluring and dangerous. Now, back to the conversation about Carol's unhappiness with her books, we see Helen suggest that she put out a more serious book that she's been working on for the last 5 years called Bitter Chrysalis. An interesting title for a book. Chrysalis meaning visible outer transformations and private inner ones, sometimes associated with butterflies. I'm going to go on a limb here and predict at some point we'll see Carol ultimately finish that book. Once she's transformed to something new, either by this season or by next season, especially after what Helen says about its potential impact it can have on others. Now, Helen brings up James Joyce Finnegan's Wake, a notoriously difficult book known for its stream of consciousness style and words from over 60 different languages. Now, its title comes from an Irish ballad about a man who raises from the dead. Now, Helen admits that she never finished reading this because it made her feel miserable, but she also puts an emphasis on her belief that it could just simply be that it made at least one person happy, and that's worth it alone. Again, I think this conversation will end up being fundamental to Carol's journey this season, linking the concept of raising from the dead to not only finding a cure for humanity, but also finding her own happiness and balance. Now again, it is clear that Helen is Carol's guide into happiness and keeps her going, but unfortunately, that's about to change. Now, just before they step outside for a smoke, which by the way is odd considering that Helen says that Carol has never smoked before, we see a TV in the bar broadcasting breaking news. As it highlights, a airbase is on lockdown. Now outside, we watch as Carol is continuously mocking her fans again as she looks up to the sky. She notices that there are planes flying in a strange parallel arrangement. Now, as Helen encourages Carol to answer some fan questions, we see the tone shifts dramatically. This is where the show descends into a more chilling, apocalyptic, Walking Dead meets The Last of Us scenario, but not nearly as bloody or gory or as violent as those outbreaks. Now, out of nowhere, we see a man crashes his truck. Carol rushes to help, but then we see Helen collapses, experiencing the exact same seizure we saw with the doctors back at the research facility. Carol runs back into the bar for help, only to find everyone inside exhibiting the same terrifying symptoms. She calls 911, but she has no answer. Now, my question is, how did all these people get infected? Did all these people get infected via drinks or by something else? The reason I say that is because their symptoms seem to have taken longer than what we saw when it was transferred via a kiss. Carol, quick thinking and desperate, pushes over the seizing man in his truck, and she puts Helen in the back since she can't use her own car because of the breathalyzer, and we watch as she takes off. The road ahead is pure pandemonium. Flip police cars, widespread destruction, the apocalypse has arrived. Now at a hospital, Carol finds the same scene, everyone inside is infected. Now back outside, Carol finds Helen, briefly comes to, and we see these red markings around her eyes and her nose. As Helen manages to briefly smile, and then, unlike the others, she dies. Now as Carol cries, the infected inside the hospital began to rise, wandering off like zombies. Carol grabs one of them and they all turn around with their smiles on their face. Now the man she grabs kisses her, but Carol remains unaffected. They try to take Helen from the back of the truck, but Carol stops them. The infected all stare at her, speaking in a collective hive mind voice as they tell her,
"What the hell is wrong with you people?"
We just want to help, Carol.
Now this is important. As Carol's driving in the streets, we see some of what seems to be some unaffected people. These individuals, clearly in control of their bodies and minds, are trying to help an injured person, and they drive away from the infected swarms. We even see the guy who helped them basically blends right back into the crowd. Where exactly were they going? Because to me, they clearly again were unaffected and they clearly have control over their mind and body. I wonder if they are a part of the 12 that we later hear about and they got away, and we'll see this scene from their perspective at some point this season. Now, there's a couple of people we see who, again, I'm assuming is unaffected as they try to put out a fire on a bus, but they ultimately get surrounded and outnumbered by the people who have the virus and maybe return later as we see Carol driving off. Now back home, trying to collect herself after her loss of Helen, we see Carol struggles to get inside her place until her next door neighbor's kids, who are also infected at this point, try to help Carol by reminding her where the spare key is she placed years back can be found. Now, how on earth did they know that detail? This makes me question the nature of the virus, or the psychic glue as what it's called later in this episode. Does the host retain its memories? Did one of these kids, now a part of the collective hive mind, remember seeing Helen or Carol place this key there years ago? Now we watch in a very creepy manner. We see the kids tell Carol that they only want to help, as we see the rest of her surrounding neighbors offer their condolences. Now soon after, the neighbors drive away and a truck arrives to collect someone who, like Helen, didn't take to the virus. Now, what's this all about? What are they doing with these bodies? Are they being examined? What are the statistics? How many became infected versus how many simply died? But the burning question, the one echoing in Carol's own mind and ours, is why didn't people like her get affected? Now, desperate for answers, we see Carol flips through the channels until she finds a man at a podium at the White House. As a message flashes on the screen, call the number when ready. Now, with a couple of stiff drinks for courage, we watch Carol dials the number.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for calling. This must be so bewildering for you, so terrible. All the death and destruction you witnessed tonight, especially Helen's passing. Please know, none of that was intentional. You have our deepest condolences. And to say it again, you are in no danger. You are perfectly safe.
Okay.
Now, Carol clearly gathering her feelings and thoughts, but she finally comes up with the most important question, and that is, what the hell is happening?
It's an alien invasion, right? I mean, obviously, it's an alien invasion.
No, it is not.
What the f*** it isn't? You know my name. You know Helen's name. You are talking to me from my TV.
By the way, the performance this whole time by Rhea Seehorn and basically following her the last 20 minutes of this episode has been nothing short of incredible. The man's explanation is a masterclass in sci-fi horror. We find out that they're not mind readers, they're not aliens, or at least from this planet, a key phrase that immediately expands the show's universe. We find out they are in fact beneficiaries of the extraterrestrial technology, the same tech that picked up the mysterious signal at the episode's start. The signal is made up of 4 tones that are recipes from
representing guanine, uracil, adenine, and cytosine. It's a recipe, it turns out, for a nucleotide sequence, RNA. We're all one.
How does that work?
We don't know exactly, it just does.
This explanation tells me that they, or us, doesn't truly know the origins of the signal from outer space, which is very interesting. Basically a creative hive mind. As Carol finds out she's currently speaking with everyone on Earth, she learns that some very important people within the government, including the president himself, has passed away. But the good news, if you want to call it that, Carol isn't alone. There are 11 others like her across the world who didn't get affected. Now they tell Carol they just want to fix her so she can join them, yet they immediately contradict themselves by saying that her life is hers. This again is a recurring theme of the show, which seems to be control or the illusion of having control. They want her to be free, but only if that freedom leads to her joining them. We watch as Carol hangs up on the world as they call her back and try to leave her a voicemail where she hears Helen's voice one last time as they tell her they only want to make her happy. Now, let's talk about the 12 unaffected, with Carol being one of them. This immediately sends my mind to the 12 apostles, also known as the 12 disciples. Could this be more than a coincidence? Are we witnessing the birth of a new world order where these 12 individuals, as reluctant, perhaps even unwilling disciples, a new kind of collective consciousness? Now, as the episode comes to an end with day 0, hour 1, 0 minutes and 0 seconds, we're not just left with questions, we're left with seeing the world as we knew it coming to an end, and Pluribus, out of many one, has truly began.
Why save the world? That's your question?
Why does the world need saving?
I've seen this movie. We've all seen this movie, and we know it does not end well.
Full spoilers ahead. We open this episode overseas when we're introduced to a new character by the name of Zosha, who will prove to be very important in this episode. Zosha is one of the infected, part of what we're starting to understand as the collective consciousness, the hive mind. Her task, and task of others like her, is global cleanup. They're removing the bodies of those who, for reasons still unknown, didn't survive the virus's spread. This opening being a reminder that this just isn't a wave of euphoria, it's a societal reset and many didn't make it. We watch as Zosha takes to the skies in a cargo plane, and I'm not sure if it was carrying anything of importance besides Zosha herself, as she flies to where she's needed above the others continuing their cleanup. Now, as we come to now understand, those infected with the virus, they don't just share a sense of well-being, they also share knowledge, and instant knowledge. It's like being plugged into the ultimate cheat code, the Matrix, with any skill or information downloaded into their brains within seconds. For example, being able to fly any aircraft, to perform in a complex surgery, it's all at their fingertips. Speaking of fingerprints, we get our first look at the new opening credits sequence with the title of the show, and we have this eerie yet almost angelical music playing in the background. To me, the show's title sequence itself mirrors the virus's relentless spread, with the lettering appearing to be in the form of fingerprints. It's like a recurring motif suggesting how the virus is literally becoming their new identity. Day 00, hour 11, 26 minutes and 31 seconds of the new world, 11 hours since the last scene of last episode. We cut to Carol waking up with a bottle of alcohol next to her, and perhaps clinging to the desperate hope that the previous night was just a nightmare. But unfortunately, the reality is very much real. She turns, and there's Helen, who's unfortunately still dead. Carol grabs a blanket, and this blanket must hold some sentimental value for her and Helen, as she wraps Helen's body in it and proceeds to go outside and bury her in their backyard. Meanwhile, Zosha arrives at her destination and is no other than Albuquerque. Here we watch the infected operate with an unsettling efficiency. Zosha is clean, dressed, and prepared, almost like royalty, but in reality, she's being prepared to becoming a familiar face to Carol. It was fascinating to observe how they interact, especially as they gear up to engage with someone like Carol. Now, if you all were paying attention, up until this point in this episode, not a single word has been spoken, which is crazy to think about because we know that there are 8 billion thoughts that are being shared amongst the hive mind. Transform and radiating with a gentle warmth, Zosha, with a friendly and welcoming presence, she pays Carol a visit.
Hello? You okay? Sorry, we didn't mean to startle you.
She offers Carol a bottle of water, suggesting that she needs to take a break from all her digging. As she tells Carol, they've been watching her, apparently from a drone 40,000 feet in the air. Now, Carol, however, is deeply suspicious of this bottle of water. She fears the water might be tampered with, a way to turn her into one of them. But Zosha assures her, stating that it's just water, and more importantly, they're months away from the point where they can actually figure out a way to change her into one of them. Now, even after learning that the person running the factory responsible for the distribution of this water bottle, and also the fact that every medical advisor on Earth suggests that Carol drinks this water bottle to avoid heat exhaustion, we watch as Carol takes that water bottle and pours it out in front of her. Now, Carol's refusal to trust is perhaps the very thing that could save her, and maybe even the world. Now, the hive mind can sense that Carol's getting upset, and this is very important. It suggests that Carol's individual emotional responses are capable of disrupting their perfect harmony. Zosha starts to leave, but Carol recognizes something familiar about her. As Carol runs back in her house and she grabs one of her books and she places that book up to Zosha's face and she realizes it looks familiar to her lead character, Raban. Now, remember Carol and Helen's last conversation outside the bar?
You want to answer a few questions for them?
What, now? No.
Do a quick one. Let them know you're paying attention. Carol, my husband says Raban can be my hall pass, which I don't think is fair since Raban's not a real live person, although I wish he was. In real life, was there an actual man you were thinking of when you came up with Raban? That's hilarious. You want to tell the truth?
Well, we know that Raban is a man in the book, but originally he was supposed to be a woman, but only Carol and Helen knew this, which brings the question, how could the hive mind know that detail if they don't read minds? Now, before we go into the reveal, I thought this was a very kind of meta moment for the show, because if you all do not know, Vince Gilligan, the creator of the show, he has said in various interviews that originally when he came up with this show idea about 10 years ago, the main character was supposed to be a man.
Started thinking about this show. The early stirrings of this show, if you will, started probably 8 or 9 years ago. I had this idea about a guy who the world is really, really nice to. And I did something I've never really done before this series. I wrote the series specifically for one actor, Ray.
Now back to the conversation. Zosha, thinking she's giving Carol some peace of mind, she reveals a piece of unsettling information. Just before Helen died, she joined the collective. Her memories are with them now. Now this actually explains why Helen was smiling at Carol before she died. Now obviously this shatters Carol. She explodes, pushing Zosha away, her grief and her anger getting the better of her, as she proceeds to blame the hive mind for Helen's death, unleashing a torment of raw, visceral emotion. Now, this emotional outburst, this raw display of free will and unfiltered emotion has a devastating effect, as we watch Zosha collapses and has a seizure. Now Carol, unaware of the monumental destruction she just caused, speeds off in her truck to get some help. Now, this reaction from Zosha is extremely important. Carol's emotional defiance has just sent a shockwave through the hive mind, causing massive destruction, even death, far beyond this isolated encounter. It's a stark illustration of the power of individual consciousness against a unified force. Now, while driving, Carol encounters a group of infected who were removing a small plane from a church before she created this massive disturbance. She rushes to help, unaware or perhaps momentarily forgetting that these are infected. Now, I'm not sure if Carol had enough time to distinguish between this maybe being a group of regular people or infected. Regardless, to me, this act proves that despite her overwhelming grief and anger, Carol still possesses fundamental empathy. She sees people in need, even if their bodies are no longer their own. Now, before leaving, notice that one of the infected is badly wounded, foreshadowing what Carol's negativity can do. Now we watch as Carol's back home now and Zosha's gone, but before she left Carol with some much needed garden supplies for the burial of Helen. Carol ends up calling the number that she was given for help and invites the female Raban back over. Now Zosha back in Carol's backyard as Carol asks her if she was the reason she froze up earlier, as she tells her that she was affected by her emotions, particularly the negative ones that's directed at them. Now this explains what happened with that group that we just saw, as Carol affected the collective mind. Better yet, she affected the entire world. Again, it wasn't just a local seizure. Carol's frustration and negativity affect the entire hive mind, essentially acting as an invisible and catastrophic EMP. Now it's here that Carol learns that she was responsible for right now an unknown number of deaths during her negative reaction. Now let's talk about Carol's powers in this whole situation with the negativity. This clearly is a major weakness to the virus, having negativity thrown their way. Carol has a weapon to use against the virus, but obviously using it results in lethal collateral damage. It's a true ethical dilemma. Obviously, this isn't the best option considering the massive catastrophic results that it has, but could it be used as a last-ditch effort to Carol's advantage against the collective mind if push comes to shove? Or at the very least, if she ever needed to have a distraction or to create a distraction, she could use this as a way to buy some time and use it in a case of emergency. Now, Carol at this point is exhausted, but she continues with her burying of Helen. But this is where the hive mind proves it can be useful, as we watch a helicopter arrives and drops off some heavy-duty equipment, demonstrating the collective's ability to effectively manage high-level logistics. With Helen now buried, Carol gets a better understanding of what is later revealed as the joining.
The astronauts up in the space station, are they like you?
They are.
And everybody at the South Pole? And on nuclear submarines, missile silos, Area 51?
Yes. We made a point of reaching them early on. That's kind of the best way to do it.
as she basically has the origin of the virus explained to her again, which ties back to the airbase shutdown that we saw back in episode 1. There's also a new discovery of a new uninfected, making it now 13 verified individuals worldwide. Now, we don't actually get to meet this individual in this episode, but I wonder if we'll do at some point. And also, I wonder if we'll start to see more uninfected emerge. Now, Carol finds out that her meltdown earlier resulted in one of the uninfected getting injured. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but in this moment, Carol sets up a meeting with the 5 uninfected who can speak English, and within seconds, the meeting is set up. Now on a Wayfair plane, yes, the same airline from the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul shows, we watch as Carol boards to meet the others. The hive mind has high hopes for this ongoing gathering, but they warn Carol that they can't protect them from one another when they all come together, meaning that if this goes south, they can't intervene because, as we'll find out later, the hive mind can't be involved with anything involving violence. Now having landed in Bilbao, Carol meets the others.
Otombayer. Pleased to meet you.
Otombayer.
Otombayer.
Otombayer. Okay, pleased to meet you.
It's Shumei. Hello.
Hello, Shumei.
Kusimayu.
Kusumayu. That's a lovely name.
I'm Lakshmi.
Lakshmi. Great to meet you.
Now you'll notice that Lakshmi has a bandage on her head and doesn't shake Carol's hand like the others did, and there's a reason for that. Now I want to point out the obvious thing here, and that is that this moment immediately establishes Carol's isolation. While Carol's alone, the others have their infected family members with them. Their loved ones, though changed, are happy, creating a personal, complex relationship with the hive mind. This difference will prove to be key for the upcoming conversations. Obviously, Carol wants her life back, while the others have accepted or even embraced their new normal. Now, we meet the last attendee by the name of Kumba, who arrives in spectacular fashion, and it is the Air Force One. We see immediately that Kumba has fully exploited the new order, surrounding himself with beautiful, compliant, infected women. One can only imagine the things he's requested of the hive mind to fulfill his happiness. Again, we can see the others are not like Carol. They're nowhere near as stressed out about this whole situation. Again, the others with their families have them at their happiest, and Kumba, while by himself, has had the infected listening and doing everything he's requested. What's there to complain about, right? Except for that little thing called free will. Who needs or wants that, right? Now, Carol demands privacy and clears the room of all of the infected. She then immediately asks the essential question: what do they do? And how do they find the cure? As the others all look at Carol with a look of surprise. Kumba speaks first, embracing the episode's major thematic shift. Why save the world? And the others seem to agree. Lakshmi brings up Carol's meltdown the other day, and that resulted in her being in a car accident causing the death of her grandfather, and that explains why she's not a fan of Carol. Lakshmi refuses to accept that her family is no longer who they were before the virus. We watch as Kumba details the utopian reality post-virus.
As we speak, no one is being robbed or murdered. No one is in prison. The color of one's skin, by all accounts, now meaningless.
A perfect sense of peace. Now, this is where the ethical argument reaches a fever pitch when Kusumayu admits that she wants the virus. She wants the happiness the hive mind describes. As we see, the others all view Carol's obsession with free will and normalcy as misplaced. They've all asked what it's like to be happy all the time, and they're surprised that Carol hasn't. Let me tell y'all, man, there was no action in this scene, obviously, or anything of pure entertainment going on, but this very conversation had me hooked on every single word. This was what I was expecting to see with this show, this very complex and layered and complicated conversation that's going on in this very scene. It almost has this heaven on earth vibe going on, or before the original sin was committed by Adam and Eve, where the world was in peace and harmony before temptation destroyed it all. I love this philosophical question about what would one do in this very position. I mean, let's sit back and think about this if this happened in our reality. Imagine a world of pure happiness with no crime and no hatred, but obviously the catch being zero free will for most. Now, my question for you all in the comments, would you all accept that world? More importantly, would you want to be one of the infected, blissfully unaware, or unaffected, burdened with the choice, but living amongst the blissful? This isn't just hypothetical in the world of this show, it's the core dilemma Pluribus throws at us as an audience, and it had me absolutely captivated. This scene not only gave us a glimpse of how other uninfected feel, but it sets the stage for a fascinating exploration of individual versus collective happiness. Now, obviously this is only half of the uninfected, but I am curious if the others feel similar to this group or if they feel more similar to Carol about the new world. Now, will Carol pay them a visit at some point despite the language barrier? Now, this is only part of another conversation coming up soon, but right now it's time for lunch.
Who's hungry? I myself am famished.
Now, despite having the best meals nearby available to them, the hive mind wasn't able to provide Kumba with a lobster he requested because we find out they don't kill. It's not in their nature to kill any living creature on this planet. Now, the conversation shifts to the joining itself. Carol points out the truth. There was no choice for humanity.
I don't recall anybody getting a vote on whether or not they wanted a joining.
We ourselves have no choice. For us, it's a biological imperative, like breathing.
We learned that the initial phase was surprisingly smooth, thousands joining daily without a reported death. But then humanity intervened. The military got involved and things were sped up, and tragically, over 866 million plus people end up unfortunately dying. Now, obviously, the sheer scale of that loss is staggering, but it leaves me still wondering, why did some, like Helen, fail to take to the infection? Again, is it genetic? Is it scientific? Is it a flaw in the design itself? Now, to make matters worse with Carol barely holding it together, she learns that her previous meltdown the day before, her emotional outburst, was directly responsible for the deaths of 11 million people. Now, obviously, in disbelief of the people she was responsible for indirectly killing, and knowing that none of the others shares Carol's desire to fixing the situation, we watch as Carol decides it's time to leave, but before leaving, she has a message for all of them. Obviously now full of guilt and anger and also alcohol, Carol tells all of the non-infected that they're all traitors to the human race.
You are traitors. You are traitors to the human race!
As Carol walks away, she ends up passing out, only to freak out again when the infected try to help her out, triggering another global seizure, including the various members of the unaffected families. Obviously, the terrifying implications, more deaths, more suffering. Now, I do wonder if when they experience these symptoms, does the actual person, the non-infected, come to, and they're actually themselves during that time trying to maybe recapture their mind and body? Also, I should have mentioned this earlier, but seeing the others with their families, I wonder if Carol, besides having Helen, does she have any other close friends or family members that the hive mind will use to maybe get Carol to get a better understanding of how wonderful the happiness is? Now, obviously at this point, you get the sense that the hive mind knows that they don't probably have to worry about the others that are not affected. But when it comes to Carol, despite the hive mind not having a negative thought or negative emotions, I would imagine that they're still slightly probably scared of Carol because of her stance against not being able to trust the infected. What will the hive mind do to get Carol to trust them? That will be very interesting to watch moving forward, and I believe Zosha will be that answer. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, Carol wakes up and calls the hive mind and learns that only one of the 5 uninfected stayed behind after her recent meltdown, and that individual is her second favorite person.
Good morning, Carol.
Carol.
Now, Kumba approaches Carol with a proposition. He wants to go to Vegas, and he wants Zosha to join him. His reasoning? Well, he made a connection with Zosha, and since she's Carol's personal chaperone, he needs her permission.
Accompany you for what? Oh, Jesus Christ.
What can I say? In the past day, I've spent time with her, gotten to know her, learned her name.
Now, the hive mind can't choose between them because it would upset one of them. Now, speaking of getting upset, we see Carol begins losing her temper again, but she stops this time because obviously more lives will end, as Carol, without saying it, basically gives Zosha the permission to leaving to go to Vegas. Now, we watch as Zosha boards a plane with Kumba, but she looks back at Carol, and that look is loaded with something more than mere compliance. To me, it was like a flicker of doubt, perhaps a plea. And something inside Carol knows this isn't right. As our final shot shows Carol forcing her plane to stop, and she stands in front of the Air Force One with her hands raised, alluding to her demanding Zoe should be brought back to her.
You saw somebody drowning, would you throw him a life preserver?
So now I'm drowning?
You just don't know it.
Full spoilers ahead. We get our countdown that's taking us back to 2,617 days, 10 hours, 30 minutes, and 41 seconds into the past before the journey began. As we flash back to sometime around 2017, where we are at a hotel made of ice in Norway, where we find Helen and Carol are vacationing. Now, while in this romantic koi suite, we see Helen is on cloud 9 in amazement of this whole unique frozen Norway experience, courtesy of travel writer Rick Steves, as we see Carol is hung up over the fact that she spent so much money to be here only to discover that they'll be sleeping on an ice bed. It's important to note that this whole scene is meant to show us that Carol does indeed live up to the hype of the world's most miserable person because she's being ungrateful. She's unsatisfied even when experiencing moments of happiness. Now, another example of showing how unsatisfied she is, we see after learning that one of her books at this time made the bestsellers list. We see Carol was more concerned about where exactly on the list her book landed instead of just simply being happy to be on the list to begin with. Now, this scene also reminds us just how much Helen grounded Carol. Despite her attitude towards happiness or being ungrateful, Helen remained balanced. She was the one to make sure that Carol was happy about the small and the big wins. Even if Carol hated it or was unsatisfied with success, Helen was her North Star. Now we watch as the couple's looking up at the northern lights as Helen's taking it all in, but Carol's thinking about it looking like a screensaver and she has to use the restroom until we see Helen has her hush up as they take in the moment together. Now, as we talked about with episode 1 breakdown, I couldn't help but to notice that Carol was wearing purple in this scene. Carol's wearing a purple scarf and they're talking about how the lights are going to turn purple in the sky. These are just more examples of how I mentioned in episode 1, like I feel like the color purple is signifying Carol's potential inevitable transformation at some point in this season. Now, I want to know what you all thought of the look on Carol's face as she's sitting next to Helen as they're both looking up in the sky. Is this the face of a person who doesn't care about this moment? I don't think so. As she'll talk about later in this episode, I believe this was a moment that Carol actually was happy. She put aside her pessimistic feelings and she really took in the moment with the person she loves the most. What an interesting literal cold open, yes, pun intended, but let's talk about the things that I took away from this scene. I want to go back to the opening lines from Bjorn, the hotel guy.
As you know, the human race grew up alongside glaciers during the ice ages.
It's cold stimulates ancient nerves, makes you feel a primal connection to the world.
Now, of course, he could have just been simply sharing some fun facts about Norway, but I think this could be important at some point. We know the hive mind struggles to process Carol's negativity. What if extremely cold environments like we see in this flashback can be key? What if staying below 0 temperatures can temporarily or permanently revert the infection to their original state, reinvigorating those ancient nerves and original consciousness? I also think about Bjorn describing the meticulous process of building the hotel, only for it all to melt every single summer. I couldn't help but think of the constant countdown that we see going up and down on the show since the virus spread worldwide. What if this virus is only temporary and during a particular period it goes dormant during a time but returns, or maybe it never does return? Now, speaking to the latter, if this is just a temporary virus, what if the idea from these aliens or whoever sent this virus to Earth is to show humans just how perfect of a feeling true selfless happiness is, and once they've experienced that happiness and once this virus goes away, there's hope that people and humanity would want to continue their own lives of a life full of happiness after experiencing it in its purest form. And lastly, Carol mentions how it was so cold in that ice room that she could have saved $100,000 and froze her own eggs in there. Now, of course, that simply could have been a joke by Carol, but it could also be that they were trying to have kids at some point. Now, the question is, if that is true, what ended up happening? Could the attempts have failed due to complications, or even worse, did they lose a child due to Carol's negligence once under the influence? Now again, it could have just simply been a joke, or if it is to be true, we don't know the exact outcome, but the context could be clear. Carol and Helen had shared a vision of a future family that was taken away from them potentially. Now back to present day. It is now day 3, hour 3, 11 minutes and 13 seconds into this new way of the world since the joining. Zosha now on the plane with Carol, and now with some trustworthy pilots with over 51,000 hours of flight experience, and not some random TGI Fridays employee like before, but Carol still finds it even more weird now.
And between the two of them, they've piloted every variant of this capable and trustworthy Airbus A330 aircraft. You're in good hands.
That's weirder than the gal from TGI Fridays. You doing this because she freaked me out?
That's an affirmative, Carol.
Please stop that.
Again, never satisfied. We see Carol taking some pills, more on that later, but as of right now, after the unsuccessful meeting in the last episode with the uninfected, Carol now wants to know anything and everything about the non-English speakers who are uninfected in hopes to have a much different and even better experience about saving the world than what she had before. Zosha gives Carol some basic background information on each of the non-English speaking uninfected. We've got an interesting mix of cat lovers, dancers, fishermen, and a potential future pony trainer ranging from the ages of 8 to 89. Now, unfortunately for Carol, none of them are doctors or scientists. Now, Carol mentions if there's any information on the newly discovered uninfected by the name of Manuel, who was mentioned back in episode 2, but the thing is, he's managed to avoid communicating with the hive mind since being discovered. Sounds like him and Carol would get along perfectly. Now, Carol has Zosha call him despite the language barrier, and it's here where Carol quickly realizes why it's been so hard to get a hold of him because he doesn't answer their call. The second call, he answers and hears Carol's voice, and he immediately hangs up. Now, they say the third time's a charm as they call him for the third time, and Carol gets him and she rushes her introduction, but he cuts her off and says something in Spanish that translates to "stop messing with me, leave me alone, bitches," as he hangs up on her. Mind you, they're thousands of feet in the air, and I'm thinking to myself, Carol better keep her temper down because if she gets upset and directs her anger towards Zosha and the hive mind, this plane ride isn't going to end well. Now, Carol has Zosha call him back immediately, and he answers again, but this time around, Carol doesn't let him get the last word as he tells him,
"Chinga tu madre, cabrón!"
I won't say the actual words, but F your mother, you little bastard, as we see Zosha apologizes on his behalf as Carol rushes off to the bathroom. Now, you notice Carol is a bit unbalanced and wobbly in the bathroom, and these effects could be due to those pills that we saw earlier in the scene. Now, before moving on, let's talk about Carol's potential new best friend, Manuel. He seems to be the person that Carol's been looking for because he seems to want nothing to do with her, and more importantly, he doesn't want to communicate with the hive mind. Now, the question is, could he be in Carol's camp by wanting to fix the world, or is he content with being alone? I'm going to make a bet that we're going to be probably seeing him sooner rather than later because I'm sure he's seen in one of the main trailers leading up to the show, so I'm excited for these two to meet because I think they're going to be the best of friends. Now back home, but before heading inside, we see Zosha and the rest of the hive mind have collected Carol's mail, and they think that she's going to be happy to find what's inside the box. Now, after going through some bills, she comes across something with Helen's name on it and takes a moment to gather herself. Now, you'll notice that Carol tossed out the other bills because they don't matter anymore, but she kept the ones with Helen's name on it. Now, Carol doesn't toss out the box as she opens it, and inside she finds a massager that helps with pain and aches and relieves stress. Carol calls the helpline, and Zosha explains that it was ordered by Helen because Carol was so stressed during the tour, and Helen bought it as a surprise homecoming present. Even in death, Helen's still making sure that Carol is being taken care of. It's here Helen demands the hive mind forget everything about Helen and to never bring her up ever again. Only Carol gets to remember her as she hangs up the phone and looks outside briefly to where she buried Helen. Day 4, hour 12, 31 minutes and 22 seconds. It's now the next day and we find Carol watching the classic Golden Girls on television as the doorbell rings. Now in this scene, there's a quick shot of a bottle of pills that I'm assuming are the same pills that Carol took on the airplane and also later in this episode. Now this is called alprazolam, which is used to relieve symptoms of anxiety, including anxiety caused by depression. It's also used to treat panic disorders as well. Now, it's safe to assume that she's been taking these pre-joining event, which adds more to her backstory to us, knowing that she has a history with alcohol, but now we know she has a history with potentially anxiety and depression, and now with Helen gone, you'll have to imagine that things have only got worse. Now, speaking to the Golden Girls that Carol was watching, I believe the episode was titled Dorothy's New Friend, which comes from Season 3, Episode 15, which aired January 16th of 1988. Now, having this particular episode in the background was brilliant on the choice of the showrunners. In that scene, Rose was telling the rest of her friends a story about a mean old lady who never smiled. Now, the kids thought that this old woman was hateful, but as it turns out, she couldn't smile because she was born without the necessary muscles to do so. Now, you can make the connections between the old lady and Carol. Is she mean, or is Carol just simply incapable of showing happiness? Now, Carol looks outside to find a person in a red car dropping off a silver platter at her front door. Now, inside that platter is a delicious prepared meal that the hive mind knows Carol loved all the way back in 2012, but of course, we see Carol closes it up and heads inside and makes another call to the hive mind. Now, the hive mind got her that food because they knew her refrigerator was low, and they knew that because they did keep the promise of never bringing up Helen's memories again because they're off limits, but they got the information from the housekeeper hired before they went on their book tour. Now, this attempted convenience is the last straw for Carol.
I want you to leave me alone.
As she tosses out the perfectly good food in the trash and heads on to the grocery store. Watching Carol continuing to reject the hive mind's compassion, their convenience, and their attempts to alleviate her stress, it all boils down to control. If this world is broken, Carol has to be the one to fix it, and right now, it looks like she has to do it alone. Now, we watch Carol driving up to the local grocery store, still driving the truck with the unicorn on it. Now, remember, she could have the hive mind deliver her any vehicle of her desire, but she chooses to continue to use this truck. Now, obviously, besides the convenience factor, I wonder if Carol has an attachment to this truck. Similar to how she kept the bills with Helen's name on it, maybe keeping this truck is maybe her way of grieving, and it's another reminder of Helen because technically that was the last place that she was with her when she was alive. Now, inside the grocery store, Carol finds it completely empty. Talk about first world problems in an apocalypse, right? Now we watch as Carol calls a hive mind and she learns that they are consolidating resources to centralize useful items for distribution.
Is there something specific you need? We can deliver to you anytime, anywhere.
I am not going to call you every time I need something. I don't want you waiting on me. I am a very independent person, okay? I always have been. I fend for myself. I just want my sprouts back.
Now, Carol nicely requests that they bring her sprouts back, and thinking that would be maybe a few days to restock the entire store, we watch as Zosha tells her that it'll just be momentarily. What felt like seconds later, maybe 8 to 10 trucks arrived, stocked to the brim, ready to restock the entire store at Carol's request. Now, it's the same day, but we fast forward about an hour after the hive mind arrived, and the project restock the grocery store is now complete. I would love to watch some behind the scenes of this very scene. I always wonder when shows do like this, did they completely literally remove all the groceries, or did they go to like an abandoned store, or did they create this as a set and then they went to like a fully operational store with food fully stocked in the store? Again, I just love seeing these type of scenes within this show because it really showcases just how quick and efficient the hive mind is. But I also want to take note of this being an example of Carol witnessing the hive mind doing whatever she wants. Keep that in mind for later. Going back to that scene though, it's almost comical how easy that was. To me, it's here the show brilliantly subverts expectations. Now, normally in these apocalyptic end-of-the-world zombie type shows, we watch our survivors having to fight and kill for food while also trying to survive and avoiding the infected at all costs. But here, instead of fighting off raiders for the little bit of food left in this world, we see a simple request brings instant abundance. Imagine for a moment being in Carol's shoes. The possibilities are endless. If this was me, I would have exotic foods from around the globe delivered to my mansion that I would have lived in, and also inviting any and every celebrity or any other artist that I love to come hang out with me. But for Carol, it's a double-edged sword. Convenience comes with a perceived loss of control. It's now nighttime, and I don't know if this is Carol being petty, or she doesn't know how to cook, or Helen maybe cooked all their meals, or maybe they had like a personal chef. But after all that of restocking that grocery store, we watch Carol watching the Golden Girls while eating a microwave dinner, and it looks like she's not even enjoying it. Now, this small act could also speak to potentially deeper emotional neglect or a lack of motivation rooted in her depression. Even with the endless options she was given at the grocery store, she chose the path of least effort, perhaps reflecting her own internal emptiness. Now, after experiencing a not-so-good microwave dinner, to make matters worse, all the lights go out, and not just in Carol's house, but across town. But almost instantly, her house and her neighbor's lights flicker back on, as Zosha calls, apologizing for the scare, explaining it was for conservation.
Carol, is there anything we could do to cheer you up?
Cheer me up? Why? I'm fine. I'm so happy. There is nothing wrong with me that a hand grenade wouldn't fix. You got one of those? Because I think that would be the perfect topper for the greatest week in human history.
Headed back to watching more of the Golden Girls, we see Carol taking her meds, but instead of drinking water, she takes some vodka, which of course is not good when taking any medication. This being a direct act of self-sabotage, a clear sign of her unaddressed pain and refusal to care for herself. Now, outside, Zosha wearing blue, just like the car she's driving in, remembering that blue is a color that represents peace, trust, and loyalty. Zosha is here to deliver the hand grenade Carol sarcastically requested over the phone. Now, as Zosha is leaving, Carol surprisingly invites her inside for a drink.
You can bring the hand grenade.
It's here we learn that Zosha can drink without affecting others in the hive mind. For example, her potentially getting drunk doesn't affect the kid being drunk. It's a fascinating detail about how the hive mind works. I do wonder, if an infected does get drunk, how do they handle it? Are they still always happy, and is there a connection to the others being happy as well? Which, speaking of drunk, Zosha, who may be a little tipsy, she starts rattling off a bunch of fun facts about different alcohols, as Carol couldn't be more entertained. Now, Carol asks about the timeline to her being in the hive mind and learns that it could be weeks, months, or even longer. Now, before moving on, is the project to turn the unaffected to the infected the endgame of this season, or is it going to be the endgame to end this series of watching if and when Carol will ever be turned? Now, Carol brings up the mixed messaging from the hive mind about the limited agency she's given until they figure out how they're going to have her join them.
I mean, I guess I have agency just until I don't?
It's here the hive mind gets real with Carol, offering a pretty interesting metaphor to Carol's situation.
If you were walking by a lake and you saw somebody drowning, would you throw him a life preserver? Of course you would. You wouldn't think, you wouldn't wait, you wouldn't try to get consensus on it, you'd just throw it.
The hive mind believes Carol is drowning and she hasn't accepted it yet. Again, as we discussed earlier, it appears that this is true. She's drowning in grief, depression, anxiety, and it's affected her life. It's clear that Carol hasn't come to terms with addressing her unhappiness and has caused her to become the person who we've seen in these 3 episodes, which again is known as the world's most miserable person. The hive mind sees themselves as saviors, but as we know, it comes with a price. Now, Carol starts describing what she believes it's like to be a part of this all-great hive mind. Things are always good and beautiful all the time, as she describes what it was like being at the ice hotel in Norway, but she stops herself, but we see Zosha completes what she was going to say, which is obviously the time she spent in Norway with Helen at the beginning of this episode. Now, of course, this violates the rule that was said earlier, and that's Helen's memories to be off limits. As Carol gets in Zosha's face and almost looking like she was ready to yell at her and make the hive mind get upset because of the negativity, and we know what happens when Carol is negative towards them, but she doesn't. But the threat was implied because we know that this is their weakness. Carol may be feeling the pills combined with the alcohol in her system, thinking there's no way they actually brought her a hand grenade as she picks it up and removes the pin. As Zosha calmly takes the grenade and tosses it out of the window and it explodes. Her removing the pin from that grenade, to me, almost mirrors Carol acting in a way of self-destruction, a kind of a metaphor and a literal explosion of her own eternal turmoil. Now we see the aftermath caused by the hand grenade as Sosha slowly walks out and she passes out with a wound on her back from the debris from covering Carol when the hand grenade went off. As Carol again shows, despite her dislike of the hive mind and Sosha, she's still a person who cares to help someone in need as she's about to get help, but before passing out, Sosha lets her know that help is on the way. I am curious to know what's going to happen with Carol's house because we see the front of her house is damaged, and I wonder if she's going to be forced to temporarily move out while the hive mind fix this issue. I don't see Carol permanently moving out and moving into a new house because, again, like we spoke about, she doesn't want to move away because this is a house that she shared with Helen. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, it's now morning, and at the hospital awaiting the news on Sosha, out comes a DHL employee letting her know that Sosha's going to be okay despite losing some blood and getting some bumps and bruises. Again, I point out, Carol didn't have to wait in the hospital to learn if Sosha was going to be okay, which shows me that she cares. Now, Carol wants to know why the hell they gave her a hand grenade to begin with because she was clearly being sarcastic, as she proceeds to ask if they would give her another one even after what happened, and they would. This is so interesting to me because this level of not being able to distinguish, the hive mind not being able to distinguish someone being serious and someone being sarcastic, you would think with all the knowledge that they have of the hive mind that they will be able to tell the difference, but clearly they can't. It's almost like having all the book smarts in the world, but they lack common sense. Carol goes on and mentions if they would give her a tank or a bazooka, and they would. But Carol brings up, what about an atom bomb? Now, there's a slight hesitation on the hive mind's part, but if requested, they would weigh the pros and cons with Carol, but ultimately, yes, they would give her an atomic bomb because
we would move heaven and earth to make you happy, Carol. Would you like an atom bomb?
The look on Carol's face, almost similar to the one back in Norway, says everything. Carol is realizing that they would give her anything that she requests.
What's happening?
She's dying, Carol. She's in cardiac arrest. May we save her?
This episode opens with us officially meeting Manuel, a character we've obviously been aware of, but we've never seen before until now. And what an interesting introduction this was. We find him in what appears to be his own self-made bunker, aka his office in his self-storage facility in Paraguay, as we were told. He's got a timer running, meticulously jotting down different radio frequencies in a notebook, resetting the timer with each new attempt to reach anyone who isn't affected. Now, here's where things get interesting. We see that food doesn't come easy for him in his office, or at least he set it up that way, as he takes a can out of the trash and licks whatever remains he can taste from this can, as we see Manuel sees one of the affected collecting a tray of food that he hasn't accepted and replacing it with a new set of food in hopes that he takes their offer to eat. They're still using the same strategy, offering fresh tray of food as a peace offering. But Manuel, like Carol, isn't easily swayed. We see him remove the barricades he's built in his office, and he now has a crowbar in his hand as he heads towards the front gate. For a second, you can see the hunger taking over and that primal urge to take this tray of food, but it passes. He knocks the tray over with his crowbar, sending the food scattering everywhere. Now, we see that he's not falling for it, reason being that he probably assumes that the food is tampered with, and it's designed to turn him into one of the hive mind. Now, back in the office, we see him writing out a formal note for his customers, apologizing for being obligated to opening their units. It's also comedic in his level of normalcy. Who's going to read this note? Who cares about him breaking into these storage units in a global apocalypse? Yet, it does underscore his character again, as it shows us that he's a stickler for the rules, for order, even when complete chaos reigns. Now we watch as he goes through various units after units, desperately searching for anything edible to eat. But unfortunately, most of it is either old or expired or just completely useless. But it's not all bad. We cut back to his office where he's laid out his treasures, which are 3 cans of dog food, some sugar packets, a creamer, and a few pieces of candy, a truly depressing feat. But then the phone rings. This was all a lead up till Carol called him from the previous episode on the plane, but now we're seeing it from his perspective. And now we can understand his abruptness, his levels of anger towards Carol makes perfect sense now. The man was starving and he was eating literal dog food, and of course he's isolated and most likely broken by what happened to the world. Now, it's clear that he was assuming that this was an affected person calling him. Again, his frustration in this moment is completely understandable. But as we know, after he hung up on Carol a few times and Carol cursed him out, but we see something clicks after this exchange. He realizes something. There's at least one person in this world who isn't affected. He's been completely alone, convinced the world was lost by the joining until this very moment. As he quickly writes Carol's name down in his notebook and writes Carol potentially Turkish, making a connection to this unexpected voice. Now, as I mentioned last week, it truly appears that Manusos and Carol share some undeniable similarities. Firstly, neither one of them can stand the hive mind. They don't trust them, they won't accept their offerings, and they refuse to succumb to any of their kindness. Secondly, they both seem to share a common interest in not joining the rest of the world and preserving their individuality against the tide. And lastly, they both obviously share a common level of intense temperament, which, given the circumstances, is again more than understandable. Now, I do wonder now, by discovering there's another person unaffected, will Manusos reach out to the hive mind and want to set up a meeting to meet Carol? Let me know in the comments below which one of these characters, Carol and Manusos, do you think will set up an actual in-person meeting to see the other person first? Let's talk about it in the comments below. It is now day 7, hour 8, 42 minutes and 33 seconds. We find Carol leaving the hospital with Sosha's blood still on her as she looks for a new ride to drive back home. Now, Carol does find a car, but it's pretty banged up, and it happens to be playing Christina Aguilera's Genie in a Bottle, which is kind of hilarious when you consider how the hive mind operates as kind of like a genie that's wishing anyone's wishes, but it comes with dangerous strings being attached, as Carol sees a cop car and takes that instead.
Hi, Carol. Can you hear us? If you feel like responding, all you have to do is pick up the handset and speak into it.
Now they're checking in on Carol, and they even offer to retrieve her own car back and even removing her breathalyzer, but Carol denies. She's not interested in favors, as we know. She's more interested in this episode in finding answers to the important questions. As she pulls up to her house, she finds the others, including the mayor, who are here to fix the mess that the explosion caused. Now inside, we find Carol in her office, and we see Carol's previous ideas for her 5th book of her series, which includes things like Killer Stan, Sand Floods, Raban dying again, but for real this time, and some things for her to research. Now we watch as she's about to erase these ideas, but she doesn't, which makes me think that she maybe wants to continue one of her books or continue the book that she thinks will mean something to people, something that we should continue to keep in mind for later, as she brings up a clean board and starts a list of everything she knows so far about the infected. Now in this order, we see her write down the following. They do whatever to please her, including giving her an atomic bomb. They can't kill, they don't play favors, and they want to change her. And the last note is that they're weirdly honest, which sparks an idea for Carol and is the central plot for this episode, and that being, can the join truly lie? Now, Carol invites one of the infected, Larry is his name, inside of her house as she needs to test this honesty theory. Her first question is simple.
Do you like my books?
Larry's response is immediate and overly vague. He says they love her books because they are her and they love her. And it sounds like the hive mind isn't being fully honest, as Carol pushes for specificity. Larry and the others start to recite a random page in one of her books, as they go even as far to say that her work is just as good as some legendary writers like Shakespeare. Larry expresses how they've experienced Carol's books by bringing up one of Carol's diehard fans and how Carol's work kept her from taking her own life. Now, sensing this isn't going where she hoped, Carol brings up what Helen thought of her books, removing the rule that prevents the infected from discussing Helen's memories. Now, we can see that Larry and the hive mind try to avoid this answer, but Carol gets him and gets them to tell the truth. Helen thought that Carol's books were harmless, more accurately, cotton candy. She felt Carol knew her audience and she was proud of her, but it wasn't high art necessarily. Even worse, when Carol asks about her unfinished novel, Larry tells her that Helen thought that it was fine, or maybe just
fine as in good? Or fine as in meh? What about the last 200 pages?
She didn't even read half of the novel. She only suggested Carol publish it because it made Carol happy. Finding this out clearly kind of upset Carol to a degree, but oddly enough, Helen basically innocently lying is similar to what the hive mind does. They do or say anything to make Carol happy. But this conversation actually proved to be the golden ticket. The hive mind can't lie about fundamental truths even if it causes Carol pain. Now we watch as Carol goes back to the board of ideas and she adds that they can't lie, something I mentioned in my last breakdown. With her new discovery, Carol visits Zosha at the hospital. Now Carol in her own way apologizes to what happened with the grenade situation, but the hive mind says that it wasn't her fault. As Zosha shares some fun facts about the officer whom Carol is using, Carol wants to ask Zosha some questions. She wants to know if they have a better understanding of the joining, despite not knowing when Carol first spoke to them back in episode 1. Now this is where my theory from last week comes true. The look on Carol's face, almost similar to the one back in Norway, says everything. Carol is realizing that they would give her anything that she requests. I think Carol now has a bright idea in her mind, now knowing that there are no limits to what they wouldn't do to make her happy. Or maybe at the very least, it appears that the hive mind can't lie to Carol, so what if she simply asks them if there is a way to reverse the virus? Carol's question to them now is there a way to reverse it, the joining? Now, Zosha and the hive mind hesitate. They struggle, but finally state that they can't answer questions like that. There it is. Because they cannot lie, their inability to answer this in itself is the confirmation that Carol needed. If there is no reversal, they would just immediately say no. Now, this is the first time since this whole thing went down that Carol has reason to be genuinely happy and hopeful. She now knows that this fight isn't about just inevitable contentment, there's a cure out there. Zosha tells Carol that soon enough she'll understand everything and she will feel so much better. Now in saying this triggers a deep, painful memory for Carol, and that's Freedom Falls. We find out that when Carol was 16 and just understanding her own identity, her mother sent her to a conversion therapy camp called Freedom Falls. At the camp, everyone smiled and repeated the mantra, "You will be accepted if you just simply join us." This backstory explains so much about Carol's pathological inability to let anyone get close because what she experienced with her mother trying to force her not to being herself. This also answers one of the questions I had after episode 1, and that being if Carol had any family or friends besides Helen that was maybe back home. It would seem that Carol most likely left her family behind after she reached a certain age because, again, her mother had the inability of accepting her for who she really was. Now, Zosha and the hive mind pull a reverse card on Carol by mentioning that they at least understand what it's like to be Carol and experiencing being alone and to suffer, but Carol hasn't experienced what it's like to being a part of the joining. Honestly, there's some good points on both sides, but I'm going to go with Carol on this one because of her experience with the Freedom Falls. It really gives us a better understanding of the major issue with her wanting to be a part of the joining, and that's obviously the complete lack of autonomy. It's another system compelling you to smile and simply comply with the quote-unquote happiness of being normal like everyone else. Now, before leaving Zosha's room, we see Carol looks at one of her bags and an idea comes to her, and it is a very dangerous one. Now, Carol goes into the pharmacy downstairs and takes a book out of dosage calculations, and she takes the page of thiopentyl sodium out of the book. Now, this is generally used for anesthesia, but has some pretty significantly deadly side effects as we watch Carol take some vials and puts it in her pocket. Now, while she's doing this, one of the infected, in their very helpful way, asks if they can assist her. Carol, quick on her feet, makes up some lie and says she wants some heroin. Now, the infected don't think it's a good idea for her to have any heroin because of her past experience with it, but again, the infected want to make her happy, and like a dominoes, as Carol says, we find out that the closest supply is only 8 miles out and it's on its way. Now back home, Carol immediately dumps out the heroin and starts her new test for her new plan. We watch as she pulls out a video recorder and starts recording herself after injecting herself with the sodium. She patiently waits, and within seconds, she passes out. She wakes up later in the evening disoriented, and she rewatches the recording as she fast forwards to the point the drug hits. Now we watch as she starts off by tweaking out for a bit, but then we see her crying and saying, "I miss you," obviously referring to Helen. Next, she reads a page from her book, and we see her walking up to the camera saying that she's not that bad. But it gets even better as Carol is now talking about Zosha and the hive mind experience and how annoying Zosha is. But Carol then says that she just hates how sexually attracted she is to Zosha as she cuts off the video. I think we kind of all saw this coming considering how Zosha is hot Raban live in the flesh, but it's going to be interesting to see if this romance is reciprocated. Can the hive mind, knowing that obviously they want to make Carol happy, will we see some romance between Zosha and Carol happening at some point? Now we see Carol throwing out the evidence because she does not want the hive mind to know this, as Carol is now set and ready to use a drug on the hive mind, but in particularly using on Zosha to see if there is a way to reversing the joining. Now as we come to the close of this episode, we see it's the next morning as Carol is now back in Zosha's room and she offers to take her out for a nice walk. Now in the elevator making some small talk, we see that this is a distraction as Carol puts in the sodium into her bag. Now outside, we see Carol nervously scans for other infected as Zosha's symptoms begin. Carol wastes no time immediately asking Zosha how to reverse everything. But Zosha and the hive mind resist and it's making her sad. The resistance coupled with the inability to lie creates a very tense scene here. As the hive mind is on to Carol, as many of them approach in this one area, we see Carol handcuffs herself to Zosha. Now surrounded by the hive mind, we see Carol yelling that she has her own agency, they can't touch her, they must back away, as she tries to get Zosha to tell her how to reverse the joining, as they all tell Carol, "Carol, please, Carol, please, Carol, please, Carol, please." And we see Zosha beginning to cry, and she eventually passes out, and she's actually dying. We see the hive mind cuts off the handcuffs and they try to save Zosha, who's suffering from a cardiac arrest, making this the 4th time where Carol has almost killed Zosha. So let's talk about this new discovery. Now obviously this new approach by Carol isn't as dangerous as when she's angry towards the others, but we see that when she can make one of them sad, all of them get sad. With that said, after Carol's actions in this episode and following what we saw in episode 2 and 3, her threat level is undeniable. I think it's safe to assume that we can expect the hive mind to distance themselves from Carol, seeing her not just as a rogue, but as a dangerous potential enemy. To me, this episode cements Carol's role as a force whom desperation might just tear everything apart for the better or potentially maybe for worse.
To my 12 fellow survivors, greetings. I'm Carol Sturka.
This episode opens back inside the hospital and the atmosphere is pure organized chaos. The others are prepping to move everyone out. And let's not ignore the man casually drinking a carton of milk, a detail that will be very key in this episode. We find Carol yet again looking stressed about putting Zosha's life on the line after what she did to her in last episode. Now, just when her stress levels couldn't get higher, the phone rings and it's Lexmi. She is yelling at Carol, demanding to know if she's mentally unsound, not just for giving Zosha a heart attack, but for making her son cry. This has to be nice for Carol, a counterpoint to the hive mind's pure happiness. Having a raw human protective rage thrown right at her has to be a good change of pace. Now Carol tries to share her breakthrough about the reversing of the joining, but Lexmi isn't hearing it. She threatens Carol never to upset her son again and hangs up. Now that phone call marks the beginning of Carol's complete isolation. When she asks one of the infected to make sure Lexmi never calls her again, the hive mind quickly gives her a nervous glance and rushes off, actively avoiding her. Now at this point in the show, we've seen the hive mind try to reassure Carol before, normally saying things like, "Oh Carol, it's not your fault," or "You actually saved their life, but not this time around." Now we see more of this avoiding Carol treatment and her getting the cold shoulder here in this next scene. As Carol visits Zosha in her room, who by the way has a breathing tube inside of her, we see Carol asking one of the infected if she's okay, and she gets a pretty flat response.
She's gonna be fine.
No emotion, no comfort, just a detached acknowledgement. Now again, this confirms my theory I shared in my last breakdown. With the combination of the sadness Carol inflicted in episode 3, coupled with the profound betrayal last week, is steadily chipping away at the hive mind's forced pure happiness. Now we watch as Carol is exhausted and she takes a nap. And the instant she falls asleep, the infected execute the ultimate ghosting plan. They silently walk into a long line, leaving Carol abandoned in an empty hospital. The distance I predicted is now literal. The hive mind is running from Carol not just because her behavior is harmful, but again, it's because she is getting dangerously closer to figuring out a cure. Her solution means their dissolution. Now, when Carol wakes up, the hospital is deserted. She calls the help number only to find a voicemail.
At the tone, you can leave a message to request anything you might need. We'll do our best to provide it. Our feelings for you haven't changed, Carol. But after everything that's happened, we just need a little space.
And this voicemail is a classic breakup playbook approach. "We need some space" is a classic line from a toxic relationship type of situation, and this dynamic between Carol and the others is now a two-way street of emotional manipulation. Now we see Carol get in a cop car and drives to the nearest tallest building she can find. Now on the roof, she sees the others are literally leaving town as Carol finally has what she wanted, and that is them leaving her literally alone. It's day 8, 22 hours, 36 minutes, and 30 seconds. It's now nighttime, and Carol returns home and begins writing what she's going to say to the other uninfected as she sets up her camcorder and records herself for what she recently learned. She makes sure to hide the bottles of alcohol in the background and gives one hell of a pitch to saving the world. Carol immediately jumps into her core theory about the possibility of reversing the joining. She shares that the infected cannot lie, and their sadness that led to tears and their current abandonment are proof that she's right. They are afraid because she's on the right track.
And when the day comes that you have peace and love forced upon you, who knows, maybe in that last fleeting moment, you might just realize you treasured your individuality.
And she calls them to work together, and they owe it to saving humanity. Now, Carol calls the helpline again, not to make a plea, but to make a demand. She wants to mail her recordings, and she wants the hive mind to make copies and to subtitle it for those who don't speak English. Carol is weaponizing their core philosophy and their willingness to please her and to help her in any way possible. But she's also weaponizing their biggest weakness, and that's sadness, as she threatens them that if they don't oblige, there will be a bad mood Carol incoming. And we all know how catastrophic that can be for the collective happiness as she leaves the recording outside, awaiting for it to be picked up. Now, Carol leaves the recording outside, and within minutes, a drone arrives to collect it. Again, I can't help but to think of a breakup scenario. This drone is basically serving as a mediator. It's the friend who comes by the apartment to pick up the ex's clothes because the two of them just can't talk without fighting. This was easily one of the funniest episodes to me up until the very end of this episode, which again, my theory I'll be sharing later, gets very dark. Now back inside, Carol actually decides not to drink, a small detail that shows that she's in a serious mode as we see her eating yet another microwave dinner. Her not deciding to drink for most of this episode makes me feel like this is a massive detail. To me, it comes off like she's locked in. She's in a serious focus mode, like she's researching a new book to write about, and I bet if she was to research and make a book about the current situation, it would probably be titled How to Reverse Global Infection for Dummies. Now we get this tender moment that reminds us that Carol is still grieving over her loss. It's here for the first time since everything went completely sideways that we see Carol finally gathering up the courage to sleeping in the bed that her and Helen used to sleep in together. As she attempts to fall asleep, she hears something coming from the outside. Carol peeks out to find a pack of wolves going through her trash, which had the delicious food that she threw away. Now immediately, Carol snaps back into her protective fight or flight mode. She grabs a golf club from the garage and screams and yells for them to leave. Now, remember a couple episodes ago when Carol was in the Sprouts and she claimed to the others that she loves her independence and she doesn't want help from them? Well, she's on the phone yet again. This marks the third time already in this episode that she's heard the same recorded message from the others about needing space. But despite that, Carol needs the hive mind's help yet again. She tells them she wants the lights cut back on immediately everywhere after this whole wolf situation. And just within seconds, we see the lights cut back on. The next morning, Carol cleans up the mess the wolves left behind. Now, for the fourth time, we see Carol calling a hive mind yet again. This time, it's about the trash needing to be picked up. Now, the phone rings, and it's a recording from the others giving her instructions to ensuring the pickup goes smoothly for the drone.
We can pick up your trash, as long as it's bagged, and each bag weighs 17 pounds or less. Please remove all bags from the bin and place them on the curb a minimum of 2 feet apart. Thank you.
And guess what? Carol clearly doesn't weigh the bag, as we watch the drone swoop in, struggling almost immediately. It's having a difficult time with the overload bag before it ultimately gets caught in a streetlight. The drone breaks down, scattering Carol's trash and all of her problems right back onto the streets. Now, this drone disaster is exactly what Carol needed to stop needing the help of the others. It actually leads her to discovering something major about the hive mind, something she had to find on her own. Now, instead of her calling for another pickup, we see Carol takes matters into her own hands. She gathers her trash and empties it into a local trash bin at the park. Now, as she's sorting through it, putting some of the trash in regular trash cans, but also into the recycling bin, she notices something peculiar. A bunch of empty and different flavored milk cartons. Not just one or two, but a significant amount. She starts looking at other recycling bins, and it's the same story. As Carol the detective puts two and two together, this isn't just random. Her instinct starts kicking in as she investigates a much larger industrial-sized recycling bin. Now she falls inside, and inside she finds hundreds of the same flavored milk cartons. As she spots a location and heads to Duke City Dairy. Now Carol heads straight to the Duke City Dairy, which is the local distributor, a place that is eerily quiet. All production has stopped and machines sit idle. As she looks around, she finds a strange orange substance on one of the machines. But then she hears some noise coming from one of the back rooms. Carol finds crows gathered and eating one of the bags of whatever's inside these milk cartons. Now this discovery, these crows eating the particular material in the bag, is a key part of what Carol finds at the very end of this episode. Now we watch as Detective Carol takes a bag of the mysterious powder back home. Armed with her apparent past chemical knowledge and a desire for answers, she performs some homemade tests, trying to figure out what's going on with this milk and the ingredients in the bag. We watch as Carol records an update, a video log for the others. In her research, she's learned that the infected aren't drinking regular milk at all. Instead, it's some strange liquid that's mixed with water into powdery stuff. She describes it as it being odorless, it has a weird texture, and it registers a 7.1 on the pH scale, making it completely neutral, which is similar to celery and water. But as she finishes her recording, a moment of doubt washes over her. She realizes the others may not even be watching these recordings. This thought, combined with her frustration and possibly new distrust, leads her to deleting the recording and starting over from scratch. Now, we don't get to see the updated version of whatever she recorded, but I'm assuming that it shared a similar message, minus the part where she got emotionally upset at the end. Now, before moving on, I want to discuss the symbolism behind the milk in this episode and what I feel it means and how milk is sometimes used within movies and shows.
These are little milk cartons, the kind we give children in elementary schools, back when we had elementary schools and children.
Now, to me, the comments made by Carol about milk cartons and how milk is intended for children speaks to this idea that the hive mind and Pluribus are, in a way, just like children. They operate in a bubble of happiness, peace, and perfection, walking around without a care in the world. That is until they met Carol, who represents adulthood, problems, stressful situations, and the desire to disrupt their blissful, naive existence. Now, let's talk about milk. Milk, as we know, is often associated with purity and innocence and youth. It signifies a fresh start. It strengthens bones, and it is a vital source of calcium, especially for children. But in media, milk can be used in many different ways. For example, there's the all-time great, in my opinion, Stanley Kubrick and his classic Clockwork Orange. In that movie, we remember the violent gang who frequently drank drug-laced milk to prepare for their brutal crime sprees. The image of these young thugs downing milk creates a disturbing contrast between youthful innocence and extreme violence. Another example that comes to mind is one of my favorite directors of all time, and Quentin Tarantino and his masterpiece, Inglourious Basterds. Remembering the beginning of that movie, Christoph Waltz's character visits a French dairy farmer who he suspects is hiding Jewish people. As Christoph Waltz's character interrogates the farmer, he calmly requests for a glass of fresh milk. Now, in this film, Tarantino masterfully juxtaposes our inherent idea of milk as a wholesome, pure drink with Christoph Waltz's utterly sinister intentions. And lastly, another favorite of mine and more recent memory is Jordan Peele's Get Out. Remember the character Rose? Towards the end of that film, we watch as she casually ate Fruit Loops one by one while sipping a glass of milk through a straw as she searches for her next victim online. This scene makes the connection between the innocence and the violence even more prominent because of the addition of the milk being drank through a straw and the Fruit Loops being eaten by hand, as it's the ultimate childhood breakfast staple. It was in that moment, at least for me, that I realized that Rose was just a straight psychopath. So the question is now, why does milk work so incredibly well as a symbol of hidden evil? It all comes down to the power of contrast. Milk represents everything these villains aren't: pure, innocent, and nurturing. By consuming it, they're essentially wearing a mask of normalcy, a veneer of purity that makes their true horrific nature even more frightening. The use of milk, again, in films and television also ties into the border themes of corruption and tainted innocence. Hell, even one of my favorite shows on TV, I think about Homelander's obsession with milk in The Boys. Again, the sight of villains or evil people or complicated characters drinking milk has become a major red flag for this character is not quite right. It's a subtle but ultimately effective way for storytellers to signal us as an audience that something sinister lurks beneath the surface. Now, applying everything that we discussed, apply that to this 5th episode of Pluribus. Now, with that out of the way, let's shift back into gears and talk more about Carol. As night falls, a new drone arrives to pick up her last recording. Inside, Carol pours herself another drink for a moment of peace that she doesn't get to enjoy. And that's because she hears some noise in the backyard and it's the wolves again, but this time around there's a lot more of them. But also this time around they're digging at Helen's grave. Carol runs outside this time around without hesitation, confronting the growling wolves. Her first instinct is to get a weapon as she dashes to the police car, desperately trying to get the gun, but she can't unlock it. Quick thinking Carol comes up with another game plan as she turns the sirens on and she drives the police car right into the backyard, crashing through her own fence and effectively making the wolves run away. It was here that I couldn't help but to see the wolves being used as a metaphor for Carol and what she thinks of the dangers and the intrusiveness of the hive mind. Think about it. They invade her space. They try to take Helen, digging at her grave. To Carol, they are dangerous, and she does everything in her power to prevent them from negatively affecting her life. It almost makes me think of the hive mind as wolves in sheep's clothing. They appear nice and peaceful, but underneath they are maybe dangerous animals. And maybe when they don't eat, they get aggressive and angry and dangerous, and remember that for later. The wolves in this episode to me feels like foreshadowing for later episodes. Next morning, we find Carol slept in the police car, determined to assure that the wolves won't return. Now, as she wakes up, Carol realizes that she had the key to remove the handcuff this whole time. It was a key on the keychain of the police car. Think about another interesting metaphor here. It's almost like she had the answer to her problems right in front of her face or within herself all along. Now, what does Carol do with this newfound self-awareness? She heads straight over to a builder shop. She loads up some stones, determined to fix and reinforce Helen's grave to ensure that those wolves never can dig at it again. Now the day goes by and Carol, without any help from the others, a significant detail showcasing her growing self-sufficiency, and manages to complete this task on her own. Now inside, we watch her later on, quietly with purpose, paint a headstone with Helen's name on it. To me, this whole sequence highlights a strong contrast with Carol. Carol, our hero of the story, is actively building, protecting, and confronting. She's taking proactive steps to deal with her perceived threats and her own grief. Back inside, Carol has another drink made, but this time she finally can take a sip of that drink, but as she sits down, she accidentally knocks over the material that the others use in the milk, and she sees a barcode on the side of the bag and heads over to the local grocery store. Inside, she scans the barcode, but it's not in the system. As Carol looks around to see if she can find a similar barcode, and she finds herself in a dog aisle, and she notices that one of the dog food bags uses the same design, and she sees the same barcode and finds the address and heads that way. As we come to the end of this episode, now at the place that the bags are made, Carol heads inside. Inside, she finds a very large freezer. Now remember back in episode 3, the hive mind talked about the need for conservation? Now Carol opens that freezer and finds racks upon racks of what I'm assuming are the same items that we saw in the grocery store, which are a variation of frozen fruits and vegetables and just normal grocery store goods. Now Carol makes her way through the shelves and she comes across this covered bag, and at first she looks to be unsure what she's looking at, but she slowly backs away in shock to figuring out what it is.
Hello, Carol. We're John Cena, and we're here to address some questions you may be having regarding our food supply.
Full spoilers ahead. We are thrown right back into the final moments of last episode, as Carol bursts out of the warehouse, grasping for air, and is still in shock and disgusted by what she saw inside. She quickly collects herself and goes to the cop car and gets her camcorder to record what she found. Talk about a Blair Witch experience, as we see Carol from the point of view of her shaky camera with some of her interesting voiceover. She eventually flips the camera over to show her face, and she gives a grand tour.
And lots of shrink-wrapped items. Yeah? So what's inside? Well,
they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, as Carol shows her discovery, and it's not a butterball turkey wrapped up in a bag, it's a severed head. This freezer is filled with human bodies, and in the back is a meat grinder, as Carol believes she's unraveled the other's darkest and deepest secret and is ready to share it with the other uninfected. Back home, Carol prepares to send her recording to the other uninfected. She continues to make sure that she includes her name and her number, which is a detail that will become very important for later in this episode. But just as she's about to seal the package, she pauses and she gets the idea to take a trip. We watch as Carol packs up her clothes and heads out, but she turns around immediately and goes right back inside. As she's now wearing a mask to cover up her face as she vacuums up the mess from the material she dropped on the floor, but now knowing that it's the remains of humans, she can't bear to have it stay on her floor. Now from doom and gloom, we snap into the dazzling, surreal fun and excitement of Las Vegas. It is here that we get the return of Kumba living his best life. We find him hosting a daytime party as if it's a Saturday night party, not a care in the world, champagne flowing and ships are flying everywhere. We find Kumba doing his best recreation of James Bond from Casino Royale. We have everything from the musical cue, which is spot on, he has the beautiful women by his side, and he has a poker opponent that is sporting a dramatic eye patch, a clear nod to Matt Mikkelsen's character who was the villain in that film. Now after having a winning hand, we see his opponent claps for him despite losing. And then the mask slips. The opponent's applause isn't genuine, it's rehearsed. We watch as the opponent gets up and pretends to be upset, which is kinda odd thinking about it because I didn't know getting upset was in the other's behavior. Kumba leaves with his entourage of beautiful women, and seconds later, the others, as the partygoers, fall back into their hive mind routine. They immediately start cleaning up the mess. Their brief but fake appearance of being an individual for an act melts away back into the collective. Honestly, I can't agree with Kumba's self-indulgent behavior, but as a total film fan, I have to admit, if I were in that position, if I had access to the hive mind powers, I'm not saying it's the first thing I would do, but one of the things I would do is gather up all the world's greatest actors and writers and directors and cinematographers and composers, and I would tell the hive mind to recreate some of my favorite movies, or at least make some new all-time movies with all the best resources available in the world. Imagine having the level of creative control, no budget limitations, no studio interference, just pure creative magic. Anyway, as I digress, but seriously, in the comments below, what would you all do if you had the control of the hive mind and if you were in a situation? Let's have some fun in the comments below. Now, sticking with Kumba, his nepotism knows no bounds. The iconic Westgate Las Vegas casino has been completely rebranded to Kumba's home, with gigantic posters of himself plastered across the exterior and throughout the interior. We next find him in a hot tub surrounded by these stunning women, truly living out his fantasies. The laughter is infectious and the fun seamlessly endless, but then it stops. The fun must come to an end because he has a visitor, and it's the ex-girlfriend of the hive mind, Carol, who is arriving. Now, we know from last week's episode that the others are genuinely fearful of Carol. Her unique resistance, her unpredictability poses a major threat to the collective. Now, they invite Kumba to leave with them to avoid confrontation, but he's a showman and he refuses. He can't do her like that, he says. He knew that sooner or later they would have to have this talk. Now, it's here that we get to see the streets of Las Vegas completely empty. As Carol arrives, her car is the only vehicle on the iconic strip. It's a pretty eerie sight if I'm being honest. I say that because I'm always so fascinated when films and television shows manage to clear out some of the most busiest and most populated places on Earth. I always wonder myself, is it done in post-production? Is it digitally removing every person or a car? Or did they manage to secure permits to literally clearing the streets for a few precious hours? Either way, to me, these shots of these empty streets of Las Vegas, in my mind, emphasizes Carol's loneliness in a way, and we'll see how much of this feeling has been weighing on her emotionally. Now, as Carol approaches the Westgate Kumba Casino, remembering that this is where he said he would be the last time they spoke, we watch as Carol looks up and she sees her name on the ginormous sign and insight that guide her to finding Kumba's room as she walks through the vibrant casino floor where the games still are going and the lights are still blazing. Again, to me, this is a really interesting stark contrast because when you think about Carol who's back home, she's in her modest house, perfectly content with the lights off until we know what happened with the wolves and they showed up, where we have Kumba who's living large, surrounded by consistent illuminations and proving just how differently these two have adapted to this new world. Now, Carol eventually finds herself on the 30th floor, stepping to this absolutely massive villa as Kumba greets her with a charming smile. But Carol isn't here for pleasantries, she's here all about business. She's ready to drop the metaphorical mic with her latest recording.
Is this another one of your videos?
You've seen my videos?
Mm-hmm.
They actually sent you my videos.
Of course.
Now, Carol's surprised to learn that he's actually been watching her previous recordings, and she's shocked that the others actually delivered them to the uninfected. He even emphasizes how much he's enjoyed the dramatic flair that she provides in her videos. Now, as she gets him all prepared for the bombshell she's about to drop on him, we see that he casually says to her,
"What you are about to witness."
Is this about them eating people?
What?
In that moment, the comedian timing here from both actors was spot on. But it's here where we get one of the most out of left field cameos I've seen in a very long time. As Kumba presses play and we hear a voice coming from the screen, but it's actually a blank screen. Just kidding, if you know anything about John Cena, you get the joke there. But speaking of John Cena, it is John Cena! As himself, here to provide Carol with the answers to them consuming people. Now, Cena explains the other's predicament.
As you know, we can't purposely kill, harm, or otherwise interfere with any form of life. That limits what we're able to consume.
Now, since they can't harm any life form, including plants, and with there being over 7 billion of them, there's a massive caloric deficit. And they needed a solution. And that solution, of course, is the liquid made of human remains packaged in the milk cartons consumed daily all around the world. Every individual other requires a particular amount. Now, the ingredients are based on local availability, that being stockpile food, but additionally, each carton contains 8 to 12% HDP, human-derived protein. Now, the others say that they're not keen on this, but they're left with no choice. Now, they assure Carol that she'll never have to consume it unless she wants to. Now, to me, this explains the emptying of Carol's local sprouts a few episodes ago. This also makes me think of the connection I brought up last week involving the wolves that we saw in the episode. Think about it. If Carol would have simply let the others take Helen's body the night she died, Helen would have become part of the HDP consumption. Now, the video ends and Kumba admits that he knew about this about a week ago, having found out after hanging out with John Cena. Now, Kumba claims that he's not exactly thrilled with the process neither, nor are the other uninfected. And this is where Carol's isolation truly hits home. Kumba reveals that the other uninfected keep in touch and they meet via Zoom on Tuesdays and Fridays. Minus Carol and Manusos, of course. It's subtle, but you can see the sting of exclusion on Carol's face. Now, as I mentioned last week, this supply won't last forever. At this rate, their human smoothies will run out in about 10 years. The other uninfected wish to help the others in making a solution and even suggesting solutions like robotic farming. Now, we see Carol showing some signs of desire to contributing to figuring out how they can help the others, as she asks if the other uninfected consider having her join the cause. And unfortunately for her, the answer was a resounding no. The others, including the non-English speakers, voted against it, feeling her presence would be disruptive. Alright, so let's talk about this whole reveal. I can't skip over the fact that his name is John Cena! Just cameoed as himself in this show, which, by the way, is just hilarious. I love that Kumba is apparently a fan of John Cena and that the hive mind made him be the official sponsor of the HDP explanation video. I wonder if it was because they thought that John Cena would deliver the news in a way that Carol will understand it better, much like they did with Zosha being her chaperone. Or did the hive mind just think, hey, everyone loves John Cena, so he's the best messenger? Either way, I didn't have this on my Pluribus bingo card, and it now makes me wonder, does this open a door for future cameos for other real-world famous people in the Pluribus world? Imagine a cameo from like a Bryan Cranston or Bob Odenkirk popping up to explain some other terrifying truth. Either way, let me know what you all thought of the HDP revelation, and were you shocked by the cameo by... Now, after learning this, we see Carol plays it cool in front of Kumba, but she heads to the bathroom, and seconds later, we see the mask drops, and we watch as she breaks down and cries. Despite Carol's tough exterior that she consistently projects, Carol is grappling with the immersed loneliness of this whole situation. I feel like, truth be told, she wants to be accepted. Not just by the uninfected, but even the others as well. These tears are a potent cocktail of being excluded from their Zoom calls, a subtle but painful reminder of her isolation and the realization that she's basically been positioned as the last person on Earth, besides Minutos, to know things regarding new information involving the others. In this moment, I think Carol is at a crossroads. Does she try to conform and fit in to bridge the gap with everyone, or does she retreat further, shutting herself off completely? Now, while Carol is wrestling with her internal world, we see Kumba is on the phone. We see him telling them how he sees how lonely Carol is, and they reply by saying how much they miss him. I find his openness and comfort with the others to be so fascinating. He believes these are private conversations, intimate interactions, but in reality, he's broadcasting them for the whole world to witness. It highlights the stark contrast to Carol to me. He's adjusted, open, and free, embracing the lack of privacy, while Carol remains fiercely closed off. Now, later in the evening, we see Carol falls asleep, and it looks like she had a drink or two before doing so. This is a subtle yet significant detail. Remember her sharp detective mode focus in the previous episode. But now we see her clearly going back to using alcohol to, as I assume is her way to escape, using it as a distraction from the heavy weight that she's carrying. Now we watch as Kumba shows some kindness to her by putting a blanket over her as she sleeps for the rest of the night. But then we see this shot of Kumba who's looking out of the window. Now this could be nothing. He could just be simply admiring the bright lights of Vegas, but I think there's more to this moment. Could he be considering Carol's point about reversing everything? When you have infinite power and pleasure at your fingertips, does it ever get overwhelming? Do moral questions surface? Is he genuinely wondering if there's a world where he would want to return things back to normal before all of this happened? I thought this was an interesting moment because, again, this could be a glimpse into his potential internal struggle, or this could be what he's going to reveal to Carol next. The next morning, Kumba continues his nice guy routine as he cooks some food for the both of them. This actually might be Carol's first home-cooked meal since the whole virus has began. Now, we see him eating her combination of toast, egg, and avocado, and he actually likes it. Now, this might be a complete reach, but could this have been another subtle visual cue from the show that Kumba is actually open to trying her way of doing things? Using something as simple as a meal as the indicator. Again, could her ideas, even about reversing things, actually hold some appeal to Kumba? Now we watch them both share a laugh as Carol jokingly suggests that she'll be staying in Vegas longer than he expected, knowing full well that he would hate that idea because it means that the others would still be gone. But I want you all to pay attention to Carol's face as she watches his reaction. Is there a chance that she was testing him, hoping that just for a moment that he might be excited by her presence, by the idea of someone not part of the hive mind staying and interacting with one another? If so, to me, that speaks volumes about her yearning for genuine company outside of the collective. Let me know what you all thought about that look from Carol. Do you all think like me that she was testing him and she actually wanted to stay? Now, as they say their goodbyes, Carol finally lays out her true feelings about saving the others from starvation, particularly her idea of reversing them back to their normal selves. As it's here that Carol learns that the others can't turn them without consent. To do so, that would require tailoring individual stem cells, which means collecting cells from their bodies with a large needle to their hip. This new detail was discovered the day before, and Kumba, interestingly, decided to not accept their offer. This could actually explain his earlier phone call conversation and even why he was staring out of the window, because he was actually maybe thinking about it. Now Carol, being Carol, doesn't take his word for it. We watch as she calls the help number to confirm this consent rule. And mere seconds later, she sees a sign outside that confirms what he said. Now Carol immediately calls the number back, making it explicitly clear that she does not give her consent to them ever turning her into one of them. This is a massive chip off of Carol's shoulders, and maybe only for the second time this entire season so far, we see Carol truly, genuinely happy about the news. To me, this moment ties directly back into the reveal we got back in episode 4 about Carol's traumatic experience as a teen back at the therapy conversion camp. In my eyes, Carol's deepest need is to be herself, to maintain her individuality. The idea of someone else forcefully taking away who she is, forcing her to completely change and conform to be a part of the masses, is the ultimate nightmare for Carol. Her refusal of consent is a monumental win for her autonomy and her fierce commitment to self-preservation, which plays into what she does next. Now, remember Zosha a few episodes ago telling Carol it would take a couple weeks, maybe a few months, maybe even years to figure out how they can bring the others into the hive mind? Well, here we are, and they've actually cracked the code, and it was quite fast. Which brings me to this big question: did Carol's recent actions accelerate that process? It certainly feels like the hive mind went into overdrive after her little stunts and recent discoveries about their weaknesses and their food choices. But one big mystery remains. Now, we just learned that the virus can be passed via stem cells, which has me thinking. Stem cells are cells with the potential to develop into many different types of cells in a body. They serve as a repair system for the actual body. Since you can pass the virus via stem cells, is this a viable option to remove the cells from the host? Now, speaking to the unaffected, the biggest unexplained question also remains. Why were Carol and the 12 others immune to the virus when it swept the globe? The show has yet to give us really any clues to that question, and right now it feels like the most critical piece of the puzzle. Now, as she leaves, Kumba makes a remark about her car choice being a police car, and it's funny to think of Carol as someone policing this whole situation, protecting and serving the world in a way, even if the world doesn't want her protection. Now, before she heads out, we see the collection of Kumba's cars for each day of the week, which is interesting, as he tells Carol that the others miss her, particularly Zosha, and they want to come back into her life, but only if she has a change of heart. But, like I mentioned earlier, Carol's accepted this new role of being the world's black sheep as she leaves by saying F them and drives away. So my question is, where does Carol go from here? Does she go back home? Does she continue her relentless work on reversing the virus? Or, now knowing that she won't be turned, will she finally enjoy the freedom of the world that's actively avoiding her? I truly believe that Carol took major offense and got her feelings hurt by the others, number one, leaving her in last week's episode, but also not being included in the Zoom calls, and last to know about the drinking human situation. With that said, I think Carol is more determined than ever to reversing things, not just for the world, but as a personal vendetta against those who abandoned her or dismissed her warnings about the hive mind. But if this is true, will the 11 others, including Kumba, try to stop her? And what I mean by stopping her is, will they actually maybe try to kill Carol at some point? Now, it wasn't said if the others gave consent to the hive mind and joining them, so I wonder if the young woman we met on Air Force One said yes, or even if Locksmay said yes. Now, let's talk about Zosha. First and foremost, I actually miss her. I hope she comes back sooner rather than later. But the idea that she missed Carol and wants her back is interesting because, let's be honest, the others collectively left Las Vegas the moment Carol arrived. That doesn't scream "we miss you" in my opinion. Now, I've seen the compelling theory online. Some believe that after the explosion and the recent heart attack, Zosha might slowly be reverting back to her true self, or at the very least, beginning to separate from the hive mind due to her injuries. Now, if this ends up being true, this would be huge. Knowing Carol now has the truth about their food source, the cure of reversing everything, their weaknesses, and her refusal to let them back into her life, will the hive mind use Zosha as a way to get Carol to come to some type of happy medium? As we see, day 12, hour 12, 43 minutes quickly rewinds to 3 days prior. We are back with Manusos doing his radio routine 2 days after his first chat with Carol. We watch as he switches to the frequency that wasn't crossed out on his list as he hears something. My subtitle said it was a mysterious pulsing, but it sounded almost like music. Now we watch as he marks another question mark beside the channel. Now, could this sound be connected to the original signal that came to Earth before the virus first spread? Could this be a clue or even a direct link to the cure that Carol is desperately seeking? If this is true, it kind of makes perfect sense. The two people who have truly not been having a good time since this all went down, Carol and Manusos, might be the very ones to find the way to reversing everything. But first, they're gonna need to have a conversation without cursing at one another and actually managing to get it along. Now, while Manusos lets the sound play, he looks outside as the others continue to drop off more food. He goes outside and tosses it yet again, but this time he notices there's a package attached to it and it's Carol's recordings that were subtitled just for him. Now he goes inside, plays it, and the first thing he learns is that there is 12 others just like him. He watches intrigued, seeing another uninfected person being Carol, finally giving him information he had no idea about because he's been deliberately ignoring the others. He's now learning more about the virus, that the others can't lie, and more importantly, that there is a cure out there. This is a game changer for Manusos, pulling him directly into finding a way to reversing everything. Now, after watching Carol's message in its entirety, this recording has motivated Manusos as he takes Carol's address and numbers she wrote on the package that I mentioned earlier, and he leaves his homemade bunker and goes outside of his sanctuary. This is important because it shows that Carol isn't alone in her thoughts about what's happened, and her and Manusos may share this in common. Him also leaving isn't just a physical exit, it's a psychological one as well. He's actively shedding the paranoia and stepping back into the land of the living, or rather the land of the joining. Now we watch as he walks the empty streets and all of a sudden they turn on. It's a jump scare to him, but to me it's the world simply seeing him again, forcing him to confront the joining that he successfully ignored as Manusos runs into his home for the first time since this all went down. Now inside, we immediately get this shot of an older man and a young boy, and the camera focuses on this picture. I assume this is meant to mean something for later involving his relationship with his family, assuming that man in the photo is maybe his father. This shot is placed right before he starts preparing his journey, suggesting that his past relationship, or lack thereof, is driving his current need for connection. As he enters the kitchen, he quickly bags up some food and finally eating something decent instead of dog food. He then gathers supplies, some clothes, maps, money, and some weapon that looked to be a gun. As we come to an end of this episode, loaded up, encouraged, and hopeful, Manuso begins to drive away. The shift in his demeanor shows he now feels like there's something to actually strive for. But unfortunately, his car stalls. And out of the shadows, one of the others appears and calls him son, assuming that this is his actual mother. The others send her in hope that they could offer him help, but he knows that she isn't his mom because he says that she's a bitch, and the helpful, nurturing version is not that version of his mom. Now, to be clear, I do think this is his actual mother, but again, he's saying that his mom is normally not a nice person, so he's saying, like, you might be the physical version of my mom, but you're not my actual mom. Now, Manusos gets his car started and drives away. He's heading straight to Carol, I would assume, knowing they share the common ground of being rejected by and resisting the hive mind.
So take off all your clothes. I am getting so hot. I'm gonna take my clothes off.
Spoilers ahead. Now, after coming off of learning that the others can't turn her, we find Carol in her cop car headed home with a much different attitude. This new, more relaxed and relieved version of Carol is humming REM's 1987 It's the End of the World as We Know It, which is ironic because her vibe isn't that of what the title suggests of maybe being in a panic, but instead we find her being in the complete opposite mindset as she pulls up to a gas station. Inside, we can visibly see her demeanor is more calm and chill and even more chipper than we ever seen before from Carol as we watch her call the helpline, and this time around, the breakup voicemail doesn't seem to bother her like it did before as she requests for them to activate pump 1 for her gas. Now, not shortly after, we see she calls the helpline again, and while waiting, she does a scratch off, and when the voicemail ends, she requests my personal favorite flavor of Gatorade, which is fruit punch, as she wants it to be the real Gatorade with real sugar, and she wants it to be ice cold temperature as she loads up her car filled with fireworks. Now, in comes the drone with her Gatorade, and as she takes a sip, she notices something isn't right. Now, Carol heads back inside, and she actually wins the scratch off, and she calls the others helpline again, and she tells them that they can do better next time because the Gatorade wasn't ice cold like she requested. It's these little cues and little signs early on this episode that shows us that Carol is now in a completely different headspace and has come to some certain terms with this whole situation after her Vegas trip. Even looking at when the drone brings her this lukewarm Gatorade and she wins the scratch off, you can clearly see she was a bit annoyed and she complains about it, but she's just annoyed. She's not enraged like we've seen her before. It's starting to look like Carol seeing this relationship with the others to be more transactional more than anything. From humming to now singing It's the End of the World as We Know It, this new Carol seems to be taking this world with a new attitude because she feels
end of the world as we know it. And I feel
just fine. Day 12, hour 20, 42 minutes and 53 seconds. Project Save the World seems to be on temporary hold for now because in reality, if she were to save the world, what does that look like for Carol? The one person she wants to bring back is Helen, and we know that she's dead. We know that Carol can't stand her fans that support her, and in general, she's not a people person. So right now it appears that Carol has decided to enjoy the isolation of the world that doesn't want her, and she'll request the occasional help from the others when needed. Carol is now back home, and we watch her celebrating this new path of life with some drinks as she sets off those fireworks she's got, and as she's standing up, she starts singing the Stars and Stripes Forever, but the fun quickly ends when she hears wolves howling. Now, instead of being frightened of them, we see Carol lets out some mild howls of her own, but then that grows to her getting a more primal and out of control howl to show these wolves, who I compared to the hive mind weeks back, that she's now in control. It's time for Carol to let loose and have some fun for once. We now find Carol singing Kenny Loggins' 1980 I'm Alright as she's headed out and she rides past a bison. Now as Carol's leaving the golf course, we see that her cop car has met its end because it won't start for her, as Carol has now decided that it's time for an upgrade and she takes a Rolls Royce covered in just married material. To me, this upgrade represents Carol having this new perspective of her situation, out with the old, in with the new. Now at a hot springs and gift shop, we find Carol in the pool singing Nelly's Hot in Here with her clothes off. Now we watch as the fun continues as Carol goes to Georgia O'Keeffe's museum. We see Carol admires the art, but remembers that she can do whatever she pleases, and she ultimately decides to take one of the pieces home with her. Now here's a fascinating bit about the choice of the piece of art that Carol takes home with her. She chooses Gloria O'Keeffe's Belladonna, which was made in 1939. Now, O'Keeffe wasn't just a brilliant painter, she was considered by many as the mother of American modernism. She played an important part of the development of modern art in America, becoming the first female painter to gain respect in New York's art world in the 1920s. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that Carol chose this particular piece of art, because if you all do not know, Georgia consistently battled with critics who dismissed her work as being too feminine or too decorative. People say that her male peers failed to recognize the depth and complexity of her artistic vision. Georgia refused to let the gender norms and social expectations define her art. Now, one could compare her defiance of going against the norm and look at Carol's actions thus far in the story as doing the same thing. This is Carol going against the grain as she returns home and replaces the decorative piece that she once had, which in my eyes represents the old life and her old perspective, with the real one, and this replacing that. Again, out with the old, in with the new. But it's here that I think we see the peak of Carol's acceptance. Carol looks in the fridge, and knowing she's not much of a cook, she decides to call the helpline once again. And this time around, she wants to set up a solo date. She calls the others, and she wants to go to a particular restaurant where her and Helen once celebrated their anniversary. Now cut to this special and expensive place, and again, for the first time this season, we see Carol dressed in the nines, and more importantly, she's eating the food made for her by the others, and she's not throwing away like she did before. Carol decides to play some music on the self-playing piano and goes about enjoying the rest of her evening alone. Now, as the camera pans, I was expecting a special guest in Zosha, but we'll talk about her later. But putting the focus on Carol and this new acceptance, she's fully leaning into the perks, the gourmet meals, the luxury cars, and the curated experience, just like Kumba did in last week's episode. She's accepted this as her new normal, embracing the isolation while using the system to her advantage. Again, it's abundantly clear that Carol has finally opened up to all the perks of being uninfected and tended to by the others, and she's accepted this new way of living. But here's the thing, it's only temporary. Remember what we saw with Kumba last week. Again, the luxury, the fun, it's all a distraction. But eventually, the sheer crashing weight of being one of the last uninfected humans in the world ran by hive mind is going to eventually hit. That glittering new mask can't hide the loneliness forever. She may feel fine singing about the world ending, but deep down she knows this isn't sustainable joy. It's a coping mechanism. The expiration date on this chill phase is definitely looming. But as of now, she's enjoying it all, but across the world, while Carol has accepted this complete isolation with some compromises with the others, we get the extreme version of what she's doing with the one person in the world who's also unaffected and is seeking to meet her to fixing things back to what it used to be. As we cut to Manusos, now days into his journey to meeting Carol, determined to fixing things back to how they used to be as he's walking in the road and he's practicing on his English. Now he hears a vehicle approaching and he unfastens his weapon holster. The others offer him a lift and some water and a recommendation for a spot to observe, a great view, and to rest, but Manusos refuses to take any help from them. The level of commitment and dedication is unmatched by Manusos in this episode. His commitment starts with the basics. We see him siphoning off gas to his car while he's practicing his English alone on long stretches on the road. I found this little detail to be very interesting. After taking the gas from an abandoned truck, we see Manusos leave some money on the windshield. It's like when we saw him leaving the apology letter at his job for the customers about opening the lockers for food. He continues to show us that he believes things will go back to normal and that people will go back to themselves again. Every encounter with the others is met with a cold refusal from him. Even in the small towns where the others greet him, his interactions are seen with this level of hate and visible disdain for them. Now, some of my favorite parts of this episode were the moments of showcasing the beauties of the world, as it's apparent that his English has gotten better and better as he's been on this journey. He continues to refuse to take any help from the others, or even rest in beautiful hotels, or even in someone's house, but instead he sleeps in his car, or even in a church, and he continues to siphon gas and even fishes for his own food. Seeing him fend for himself and being very efficient on his own so far has been a very different experience to watch compared to what we've seen from Carol and her microwave dinners and phone calls to the others with requests. That to me really speaks to both of their individual personalities, their upbringings, and their levels of survival instincts. But the biggest difference I've noticed between them is how early on we saw Carol eventually caving in and accepting some things from the others, but Manusos has made it his life's goal to avoid them and accepting nothing from them at all costs. Seeing where Carol is at this point in the season and what she's experienced so far versus where we find Manusos has been very interesting. Again, unlike Carol, who's had extended interactions with the others and even spent time in intimate settings with them, versus Manusos, who's had zero real contact with any of the uninfected and almost no conversations with the others. He's running a pure, uninterrupted isolation streak, choosing self-reliance at every turn. Again, they seem to have the same goal in mind, but his extreme levels of isolation and his lack of interactions definitely sets up this inevitable meeting with these two characters to be very interesting, especially how we end this episode with Carol. Now back on his journey, which hasn't been stalled by many mishaps, we see he finally comes across a major obstacle. This being a literal fork in the road as he arrives at the Darien Gap, hence the title of this episode. Now this isn't your average detour. It's a roadless expanse between Colombia and Panama. Dense rainforests, mountains, and one of the world's most unforgiving environments. Now, Manusos isn't going to let this stop him as he says goodbye to his car, and the others try to intervene and tell Manusos just how dangerous moving forward can and will be for him. The others warn him about the dangers of the extreme weather, the lack of clean water, deadly plants and animals, but Manusos treats every single warning from them like a lie. Now, as he ignores them and packs up his belongings, and despite his chances of surviving being very low, he's going to push forward. But then the others play the only card they have left with him, and that's Carol. They offer him a fast trip to New Mexico, promising that he'll arrive to her by nightfall. Now, instead of being tempted, he performs one of the episode's most unexpected moments. As he pours gasoline on his own car, declaring that nothing that they have is theirs, and it's all stolen, and they don't belong here. He ends up torching his car, cutting off any possibility of the others owning it, and he steps into the gap alone. Now, watching him torch his own car to ensure that the others don't claim it is very extreme, but it makes me wonder if this was foreshadowing. Him saying to the others that they don't belong here makes me think about Carol questioning if the others would ever give her an atomic bomb if she requested it. Based on everything we've seen so far from him, I wouldn't put it past him if we see that conversation about the atomic bomb being brought up again, and Manusos actually taking action in removing the others in the most extreme and violent way possible. In my eyes, they really set him up to have extreme views and getting rid of the others by any means necessary if it comes to it. Now from here, the episode shifts into raw survival. Days and nights blur together as he repeats his name and says that he's not one of them and he wants to save the world. But the non-stop journey finally takes its toll. In the most tense moment of the episode, we watch as he almost stumbles straight into the chunga palm, which was mentioned earlier by the others as a black palm tree with needle-like bacteria-coated spines. Now, having traveled this far and visibly being tired, we watch as he slips and falls backwards on the tree and lets out an agonizing scream. We proceed to watch him pull himself free, only to have the pain escalating even further. Now, as night falls, in one of the most self-sufficient but brutal scenes so far this season, we watch as he cauterizes the wound on his back with a machete heated on a fire. Now, by morning, we see that he's bleeding heavily and the infection has spread to his face as he passes out and whispers Carol's name as he slowly fades away, but not all hope is lost. Above him, a helicopter approaches as the others are here to rescue him. Man, his level of defiance almost got him killed. He does not want any help, any recommendations at all by the others. But speaking of the others rescuing him might be the biggest mistake that the others have made so far this season. We've seen him turn away every single thing they've offered him, and now assuming that he'll wake up and he'll see that they saved his life, I don't think he's gonna take that too kindly. I think about the time we saw Carol's reaction to the others trying to help her after she fell from having too many drinks and how she yelled at them, and we saw how the others reacted and how many deaths followed because of her negative reaction. I can see Manusos acting in a very similar fashion and possibly discovering that he can harm the others by his feelings like Carol. We're going to be discussing more of this topic a little bit later in this breakdown. It's now day 48, hour 16, 57 minutes and 11 seconds from leaving a character that almost died to now going back to Carol, who may be feeling dead inside. We find Carol 36 days from the last time we saw her, as she's now listening to a self-made mixtape, and she's now went from going from the golf course to now playing golf in a parking garage, hitting the balls into nearby buildings. You can see that she's grown bored of the perks of freedom from the start of this episode. You can see it in her eyes. This isn't freedom anymore, it's desolation. It's now nighttime and still lighting her fireworks, but in a much different way this time around. From standing tall and singing and howling at the wolves to now playing music, drinking while sitting down and having a look of being unhappy and bored and again, lonely. Now, one of the fireworks tilts towards her and she sees this and she doesn't move an inch, but instead she turns her chair towards it and welcomes whatever fate comes her way. as it goes off just inches from her face, and her once neighbor's garage is set on fire as Carol watches. Even putting this fire out feels like she's just doing another chore, and it's just a meaningless routine. To me, this is Carol at her lowest point without question. Her allowing that firework to possibly kill her was a turning point that she just can't ignore. This isolation isn't freedom, it's death for her. The isolation and loneliness has completely won. She wants the others back. If life is gonna mean anything moving forward, she needs them back in her life. Now, the next morning, look at what Carol is wearing, and that is a pure white shirt. To me, this isn't just a fashion choice, it's a symbol. It's Carol literally waving the white flag. The woman who built walls and ran from connection is done fighting solitude. Now at a home improvement store, Carol grabs some paint and heads home and puts up a message for the others to see. It's clear as time has passed that Carol was once happy with this idea of complete isolation, but that clearly has changed. Also, the fact that she painted what she did versus not calling the others goes a long way because it shows she's truly had a change of heart like the others were looking for. As she's now staring at the painting in her living room from earlier that she took, she hears a car outside and it's Zosha. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but what's interesting about this painting is what the belladonna plant is known for. Belladonna, known as the deadly nightshade or belladonna, is a toxic perennial herbaceous plant in the nightshade family. Now, what's interesting about this is, who is the toxic person in the situation? Is it Carol or is it the others in Zosha? This all ties into my theory that I'm going to be sharing here shortly. Now, Carol slowly walks towards Zosha and walks past the just married painting on the car. As we see, Carol gets emotional because she's missed her as she hugs Zosha, who embraces her. And as the camera pans out, we see the message that Carol left for the others, and it was for them to come back.
How someone has to put the world right, even if it means you all leave me again, even if it means that I'm...
Spoilers ahead. Now, the first thing I want to discuss in this week's breakdown is the title of this episode, which is pretty important. Episode 8 is titled Charm Offense. Now, honestly, I've never heard anyone in my life use this phrase, but it's a perfect title for this episode. The phrase means a campaign of flattery and friendliness designed to achieve the support or agreement of others. It's actually funny because when I looked up what it meant, this list popped up. It read, what are the signs of charm offense? Now, I clicked on this list, and here are the 5 signs that your partner may lure you into an unhealthy relationship. Now, the first thing that popped up on this website was controlled dating of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, remember this very conversation we had a couple weeks ago about how I was saying that the hive mind is basically wolves in sheep's clothing? Now, I'm not going to go over every single detail of this 5 things that they have listed down, but it is pretty much what we see the others doing with Carol in this episode. Number 1 being, they tell you everything you want to hear. Next one being, they engage in future faking, which is a tactic to make you invest in a relationship. Next thing on the list is they love bomb you. If you're only on a few dates and they're already showering you with extreme affection. Next thing is they buy you big gifts. And last but not least, your gut telling you something isn't right. With all that being said, let's keep those things in mind as we break down this episode. Now, we open this episode with blood dripping onto someone's shoe and more blood hits the floor as the camera pans and it's Manusos. He's alive and in the hospital bed, saved by the others who pulled him from the nightmare of the Darien Gap. The antibiotics they gave him worked, and again, it's important to keep in mind that they are the ones who literally saved his life. But when they tell him that he needs to stay to fully recover, we can see the wheels turning in his head, as his eyes look over at the pair of medical scissors on the tray next to his bed. Next scene, we see Manusos with those same scissors in his hand as he has them pressed against the neck of one of the others as they walk out of the room. Now, he's determined to leave in this hospital. There's no discussion to be had, no debate to be had, but before he goes, he insists on paying his bill. He demands to pay for every single bandage, every single pill, every moment of this care. Now, the others calmly explain with the weapon to their throats, smiling, how much his visit would have been before the joining. Now, it's here that he realizes that he's in Panama as the others offer him an itemized receipt, and he ultimately decides to leave the hospital to continue his journey to Carol, which, according to Google, is about a 69-hour drive as he leaves. Now, as we know, the others need consent and stem cells before changing the uninfected, but I wouldn't be surprised if they took blood samples from him while he was asleep and they could possibly test on his blood somewhere later down the road. Now, last week, I floated the idea that the show is positioning Manutos as a potential villain, and some of you all thought I was making a bit of a reach. Now, when I say villain, I'm not talking about a mustache twirling villain. I mean in the sense of a villain that he is going against the hive mind and he's as much of a threat as Carol once was. I mean, just look at the scene that we just saw. He was literally holding scissors to the neck of someone who just saved his life, all because he doesn't trust them, doesn't trust their medical advice. Again, we are seeing that Manusos is so focused on his mission to find Carol that he is willing to destroy anything, even those trying to help him to get there. Again, I'm doubling down. I think Manusos is one dangerous individual, but not in the sense that he's like this all evil person. He just believes what he's doing is the right thing. Now we transition over to the exact person he's traveling to, and that's Carol. We find Carol in the kitchen making a non-alcoholic drink for her and Zosha, a welcoming gesture for this reunion and this temporary breakup between them. Now, this being the first time that Carol and Zosha have met in Carol's house since the grenade explosion and since Carol drugged her, but hey, the past is the past. And despite all of that history, despite the multiple threats, Zosha, and by extension the others, don't hesitate in drinking the drink that Carol has made for them. That right there just continues to show us as an audience the fascinating exploration of the others and just their prime directive of making the uninfected happy, even at a potential cost of themselves. We watch as they make small talk as Zosha points out how nice the O'Keefe piece looks in Carol's living room. And Carol, who has just recently experienced so much isolating alone time, she immediately gets flustered. As she says that she was planning on returning it as soon as she could, and she spins this story about protecting it from these loose animals like the wolves getting into the museum.
Yeah, that could be problematic.
Now, of course, this is a lie, but it comes from a place of this newfound vulnerability for Carol. Now, as they exchange some looks and some awkward silence, we see Carol gets a little nervous and even emotional about not knowing what to say next. I feel like this was either Carol just putting on an act, or this just continues to show this more vulnerable and forgiving side of her that we haven't seen before. Now, to break the ice, Zosha suggests the board game. Now, Carol immediately points out the obvious, that any game of strategy is pointless when the opponent has access to 7 billion minds. But then Zosha thinks of a perfect solution, and that is a game based purely on something from Carol's past, a game where Carol has a sense of control and has an advantage. I gotta point out, this whole exchange felt so familiar to anyone who's ever experienced a breakup with a partner or even a close friend, and that first meetup or the hangout is just so awkward, and you don't want to be too happy, but you also don't want to be too weird or standoffish. This scene and others later really capture that emotional turmoil really well. Now, the game they decide to play is called Spit. It's a fast-paced 2-player card game, no turns, just pure speed. It's a game Carol used to play with her cousins. Remembering the others always want to make the uninfected happy, Zosha repeats a line that Carol's grandmother would always say to make Carol feel this sense of nostalgia, as she even offers Carol's cousin, Henry, to pay a visit to her since the last time they saw each other was 20 years ago, but we see Carol denies. Now, that obviously is something new that we learned about Carol. It's only the second time we've heard about Carol's extended family beyond Helen and her parents. It's another little piece of her backstory showing that she hasn't had any contact with her family in at least 20 years. It also means that some of her family is alive, and obviously they're a part of the others in the hive mind, and it makes me wonder if we'll ever meet them at some point in this show. Now, it's here that we get to see the game within the game from both sides, but particularly from Carol and the games she's playing throughout this episode. She questions the others and Zosha on where the name of the game Spit came from, but the others can't recall why the game is called that. Again, this little detail proves to Carol that despite having the knowledge of 7 billion people, there are some things that they just don't have answers to. But another thing that I found interesting is how at first, call it mercy or call it being nice or simply being too slow, Carol is winning the game at first, but Zosha makes a remark about continuing to play the game to see if the others were letting her win or if they were just warming up.
Keep playing and you'll find out.
Now, we eventually see the others and Zosha win, and we see this very human reaction from them winning the game. Now, last week, we spoke to the potential deeper meaning of why the show chose to have the belladonna as the piece of art that Carol stole, and the idea of who's the toxic poisoning person between Carol and Zosha and the others. As again, this whole scene just makes me think that they're both sizing each other up. And that's really the theme of this episode. Surface level fun masking deeper test. Are the others letting their guard down, or is this another layer of the game? Now outside, Carol learns that just in a few hours, the others will have completely returned to Albuquerque. As Carol calls it a night, Carol brings up where Zosha lives, and instead of answering it, we see Zosha just shows her. Now it's here for the first time. We as the audience, and of course Carol, see where and how the others sleep. Now it's no fancy hive mind lair, just a large empty arena. In this case, it's the real world Rio Rancho Event Center, where the others stay together for efficiency. Now it's here we get to see a little bit of that personality and sense of humor from Zosha and the others put it on display early on, as Carol makes a funny joke about the others having a giant orgy like from The Matrix Reloaded, which is a great reference by the way, as Zosha responds in such a hilarious way.
Not unless you wanted to.
I found that moment to be so funny, and the icing on the cake for me was the moment where Carol looked to see if the others were joking or if they were really taking maybe some life advice from Kumba. But secretly, I think the others were planting a seed for a more mature and sexual angle here with Carol, maybe even flirting, which comes to fruition a little bit later in this episode. Now I know some people, even myself, wondered if maybe some of the animals around the world were infected by the joining, but here we get our answer with little bear Jordan, an uninfected dog whose owner is now a part of the collective. Now Zosha offers for Carol to stay the night with them, and initially Carol says no thanks, but we cut to the very next scene to see that she decided to sleep over. The question is this a part of Carol's research or her way of simply not wanting to sleep alone again like she did in the last 36 days in isolation? Now, not only that, but as we see Carol wakes up in the middle of the night, we see she finds her hand on Zosha's shoulder. Now, call it a habit from when her and Helen would sleep at night, or call it Carol now feeling extremely comfortable around the others like never before, and she's happy to be in the presence of other people. Again, assuming this isn't a part of Carol's plan, this is a huge step for her. Opening up her kindness to the others, experiencing where the others lie their heads, all new territory, but again, this to me is Carol having her cake and eating it because she has a hidden agenda that's going on here. Next morning, after a day of board games and ending with a sleepover, we see Zosha tells Carol that they've had a wonderful time with Carol and they're happy to be back in her life. Now, Carol is taking it all in, but she reciprocates the feeling she had a good time with the others. And again, this to me is a show really leaning into the idea of a couple taking the proper baby steps to regaining, or in this case, gaining a sense of trust with the other person and establishing a relationship and a bond. Now inside, and after experiencing what she's done with the others, we see Carol's got some new details to add to her list of things she knows about the others on her whiteboard. Now, one major new note is a big one, and that's number 6, and that is they eat people. It's so interesting that she's just now putting this on the board, considering that she found this out a while ago at this point. It was almost like she's writing this down to remind herself to keep focus and to not forget the goal, and that is to not fall for the kindness, but again, they do eat people. Again, this is Carol playing nice for now at least, and also making sure to not get too caught up in the others' overly nice behavior, but also taking advantage of them being naive and oversharing things when she asks them questions in a more casual manner. Now, I'm not sure if this is later in the same day or if this is the very next day, but we find Carol and Zosha on a hike together as they stop and overlook the beautiful view. Now, another example of this episode continuing to shedding light on Carol as we yet again get another detail that even the hive mind didn't know about her. She shares that she loves trains, particularly the sound of its horn.
You knew everything about me.
Not this.
It is the loneliest sound in the world.
You know, I'm trying to think of if I was in Carol's shoes, what would I like about the loneliness of the horn of a train? And I don't know, is it maybe the movement across vast empty distance? Let me know what you all thought of it in the comments below. Now, after hearing this, the others have the passing train honk its horn for Carol, who takes the nice gesture and makes it into her secret continuing investigation as she asks Zosha how exactly does the hive mind communicate with one another.
So, like radio?
Sort of.
But radio transmission is like talking. It's conscious. Our communication is unconscious, homeostatic, like breathing.
They compare it to a radio signal, which is very interesting because this goes back to the original signal that started the joining, but this also to me 1000% make me think about the small detail of Manusos discovering the mysterious channel 86130 signal from a few episodes ago. I said it then and I'm saying it now, whether it's in next week's finale or next season, that signal will prove to be very important and most likely is how the hive mind is communicating with one another. Now, despite knowing the basics of how they're able to communicate with one another on a global scale, we see Zosha brings up the fact that there are still a lot of things that they don't fully understand. Now, to remind us and Carol that things aren't exactly perfect with the hive mind, we see Carol questions why they still need trains, as Zosha hesitates to respond because this is a very sensitive topic, as they still need them to move their food distribution, aka their human smoothies that John Cena has 8 times a day. Again, a reminder of the grim reality beneath the surface. Now we watch as the investigation continues from the mind now to the body. In a genius move, Carol takes Zosha for a massage. She asks another brilliant question. Do the others feel what they're feeling right now and giving themselves a literal massage?
Not exactly. It's kind of like in the last 10 minutes, there's been 1,674 deaths and 965 births. To feel everything all at once would be unbearable. But we know it as it happens. We're aware.
But they don't share the physical pain or pleasures that one individual experiences. An individual's physical experience is their own. File that away because it's absolutely critical for a future physical interaction between these two later in this episode. Now, can we just take a moment to appreciate how good it is to have Zosha back? The chemistry between the two actors is just phenomenal. To me, Zosha just has this calmly powerful presence that feels like a warm blanket on a cold day. She's just the perfect, compassionate person for Carol to have in these type of scenes. Now, the setting shifts tonight under a sky full of stars. Now, for those keeping track at home, from learning where they rest their heads, to how they communicate, to now where the signal to Earth came from, Zosha shows Carol the real world Kepler-22 and Kepler-22b, its planet. Now, the others admire where the creators come from, this ocean world, and they close their eyes to picture it sometimes. Now, we watch as Carol plays as if she can't find it, letting Zosha guide her and makes it easier for her to spot it. This again has been Carol's strategy in a nutshell in this episode. Play submissive, be kind, and let them show off. All these little adventures, or you might call it a date, are just her way of subtly asking questions and learning and studying the others while entertaining their kindness. Now, this next moment might be a future detail we should all pay attention to and remember for later down the road. Zosha says that the others most likely will never meet those who granted them this so-called freedom and gift. But they know they love them and they will pay it forward however long it may take. They want to share this gift with every other existence in space. Okay, so who are they to decide that every single being in the cosmos, in the universe, needs this so-called gift? This moment here just tells us that this isn't just earthbound anymore. The other's ambition is universal. Again, it just brings up so many questions. Who are these creators and will we get more information on them in next week's finale? By the way, this whole sequence was so beautifully shot. The use of the lighting with the red light in the background and them looking up in the stars was just masterfully crafted. It is now the next morning, and as I've been alluding to throughout this breakdown, it is here we see all the notes and information that Carol has been gathering from Zosha since the others have been back. As we now have up to 12 items on this list with a ton of side notes as well. The new notes include their sleeping situation, how they communicate, their transportation of their food source, how they experience physical feelings, and we also see the signal and where they come from, and then we have this very important one here. The others are building a giant antenna to send a signal to space to share this gift, as we talked about, the entire universe possibly. Again, I am so interested in learning more about who these creators are and this virus and where it stems from and why they feel the need to share this gift with all living beings in the entire universe. Now, as Carol has ran out of her markers, she calls in a favor for Zosha to re-up. Zosha brings her new markers, and Zosha asks if this means that she's back to writing her Wakaro books. For a second, Carol thinks she's been caught, but she plays it cool, confirming yes, she's writing again. But we see that the others are excited by the news and hope they get the opportunity to read it once she's done.
Happy writing, Carol!
Back inside, Carol looks at her notes for a book and she smiles because to me, this is her now adding this new idea to her mission to keeping the others in the dark and to keep appearances going. If they want Wakaro, she's going to give them Wakaro, while the real story, her investigation into the truth, continues in secret. Again, not sure how much time has passed here, but we see that the two are now playing a game of crochet in which Zosha is winning due to the advantage of having the combined knowledge of all the sport's greatest players.
We're doing that.
Now this speaks to the others having muscle memory that they share amongst them, which is so interesting. This shared muscle memory means that anyone, regardless of their age or experience, can know how to perform a pro-level move even if their body can't actually execute it. For example, a child could know how to body slam an opponent from the memory of John Cena, or an elderly person can remember the perfect tennis serve from someone like Serena Williams. Now Zosha questions Carol's best writing day and she doesn't have an answer for her, but this particular question was all a setup for a surprise the others have for Carol to show how happy they are to be back in her life, but to also show how happy they are that she's writing again. Now we watch as they drive to a diner, which is familiar, warm, and a place that Carol hasn't seen in years. But she recognizes it instantly. This is where her career first began. Now inside, it is packed. The smells, the sounds, the jukebox playing a nostalgic tune, it's all perfect. The others are here, casually eating, laughing, pretending it's just another Tuesday. It reminded me of Kumba's Bond movie moment all over again, a perfectly structured illusion or a loving gesture. Now Carol is overwhelmed as she smiles and laughs, but then reality kicks in. She remembers Bree, a server from years ago who made her feel seen and comfortable with being in a diner for hours in. But then Bree walks over. She pours Carol's coffee just like the good old days. Except Bree is now a part of the hive mind. And it was in this moment that the spell finally broke. And that's because Carol knows that this diner burnt down. It was gone. And the fact that the hive mind rebuilt it from scratch just to comfort her is way too much. Too perfect, too manipulative. Carol has to see this offering as not just nostalgia, but they're weaponizing her past. Now we watch as Carol leaves and she runs back home alone again, but not for long. It's now nighttime and Zosha arrives outside, and inside we see Carol give Zosha a drink and challenges her to stop saying we and referring to herself as I, and we can see that this is a struggle for Zosha. After learning what Bree has been up to all these years and where she is now, Carol shows her cards and finally drops her own mask of how she's been acting up until this point in the episode. She admits to the others that she never stopped her research and she's still searching for a way to undo the hive mind. Now, Carol wants to hear from the others that they know that she will never give up from fixing the world back to how it used to be, as Zosha and the others do exactly that.
Manipulative bullshit because you know I haven't given up. Admit it. Tell me you know I won't give up.
We know.
It's now time for honesty. As Carol admits liking the others, but we know she's talking about Zosha in particularly, but she knows that this doomsday clock is ticking for Zosha because of their decision to consuming food that will lead to their deaths in about 10 years. Carol breaks down expressing how painful and lonely it may be, but she's determined in fixing the world to being right again. This was the moment in this episode that it all came together. Yes, Carol wants to fix the world and is doing all this secret research to do so, but Carol also is very much interested in exploring a potential relationship with Zosha and experiencing what a life could look like if she's with her and them. By the way, what brilliant acting by these two actors, and particularly with Rhea and how outstanding she is in showcasing this complex situation that she finds herself in. Now, being encouraged to referring to herself as I, we see Zosha sees this emotional moment that Carol's in as an opportunity to taking their relationship to another level as she slowly walks up to Carol and kisses her. I couldn't help but to think about episode 1 when we saw the doctors get the virus and how they kiss people in order to spread the virus along. Zosha kissing Carol and obviously not affecting her, but in a way it's affecting her emotionally and physically, and Carol, once who resisted the idea of ever joining the others in any way, has now embraced them and has essentially joined them in some way if you think about it. Now, Carol is shocked by this kiss, but ultimately leans in and kisses her back, and even though we don't see what happens, we cut to the next morning and see Zosha naked in Carol's bed, implying that they had sex overnight. Carol has fully changed over a new leaf and has accepted the others, but more importantly, has accepted Zosha. My mind is still unable to comprehend if Zosha as an individual possibly kissing Carol, or if this was the others collectively deciding to kiss Carol. Was this a power move by the others to take advantage of Carol's vulnerability, and did Carol do the same? After she was kissed, did Carol see this as an opportunity to really make the others think that they got the best of her and she's no longer looking to fixing things back to what they used to be? Again, this goes back to the belladonna conversation. Who's the poisonous, toxic person in the situation? Is it the others manipulating Carol, or is it the other way around? But I also want to bring up this important character moment for Carol. The idea that the others can't physically feel the kiss or having sex, but thinking about the fact that 7 billion people know that Carol slept with Zosha is huge for the character. You all have to remember that before the joining, Carol was a closeted woman who couldn't even express herself and even had her once female-led character in the books to become a man, and was afraid to share that with her so-called diehard fans because she was too afraid to do so. Again, her parents literally tried to change her by having her go to a conversion camp, but now, in front of billions, she's fully embracing who she is. This entire scene has so much complexity, is so layered with truths and lies and emotions, and just adds so much depth to the show and to the particular relationship between our characters. Next morning, now feeling energized and encouraged, we see Carol woke up early and wrote one chapter of her new book, and she has Zosha read it. Zosha comes out and shares her excitement about Raban now officially being changed into a woman as it was originally written. Now, this isn't just a plot point anymore, it's a mirror to Carol's situation. Again, Carol finally accepted herself in front of the literal world. Now, tapping into the hive mind of Carol's diehard fans, we see Zosha and Carol nerd out about how Raban is now a woman, and Zosha tells Carol how much she, as the pronoun I, loves it. Now, watching Zosha and Carol nerd out about the minutia of how Raban's a female sounds like a bunch of gibberish right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was the show's way of foreshadowing clues to how Carol might actually find a way to fixing the world by using her book. It is now day 60, hour 8, 59 minutes and 30 seconds. It's been a little over 3 weeks since the reunion, and we see Carol and Zosha are practically living together now. We hear the radio station playing in the background and everything seems normal and happy, and we see Carol looks at Helen's grave, and man, talk about the meaning of a look. What does that look mean, and the pause that she has here? Is she ashamed, like she's moved on, betrayed Helen, or is it the opposite? A promise that she will never forget her. This doesn't change what they had, because potentially loving Zosha doesn't erase loving Helen. And maybe that's the point. Carol isn't replacing one love with another, she's expanding, making space. Now we see this new couple are preparing food together, real food, not smoothies, as Zosha isn't starving, she's actually eating with Carol as this new version of herself in Carol's eyes, choosing individuality. We see Zosha is now, with the help of Carol, is making more of an effort to referring to herself as I rather than we or us like she did before. As we watch, Zosha shares a memory of Zosha's childhood and how she discovered her favorite food, which happens to be mango ice cream, which by the way is pretty fire if you ask me. Carol's thankful for her sharing this, but like what happened at the diner, reality yet again kicks in. Zosha stops and communicates with the others and shares with Carol that she's going to have a visitor soon. And it's the one person who has no interest, no care, or respect or affection towards the others. It's Manusos. We end this episode with seeing him rebandaging his wounds, and he is now only 31 miles away from finally coming face to face with the one person in the world that he knows wants the same thing that he does. That obviously being avoiding the others, no matter the cost, even if it means death, and more importantly, fixing the world back to how it used to be.
My name is Manuel Oviedo. I am not one of them. I wish to save the world.
Hola.
After almost dying to get to her, Manusos has finally made it to Carol, but things don't go too well at all for the two, so much so that Carol joins the others in leaving him behind after his methods scare Carol and the others. In this finale, we see Carol completely lets herself fall into the illusion of the others' happiness until she learns the truth. I can't believe it's been 9 weeks, but we've made it to the end of this story. So with all that being said, let's dive into this finale and discuss that ending and break down the themes of identity, love, and betrayal, and what happens when the people you claim to care about have a hidden agenda. Full spoilers ahead. It is day 71, hour 13, 31 minutes and 29 seconds, 11 days from where we last ended episode 8. We skip ahead in time to find a plane in the sky flying above, and with it, the return of one of the most quietly compelling characters of the show, and that is Kusamayu. Now, she's not alone, unlike Carol was at one point in Manusos. She's with her aunt and cousin, the same family members we met way back in episode 2 when Kusamayu first shared her desire to belong with the others. Back then, she was the only one in her village not a part of the collective. She was an outsider, the one watching everyone else move in unison, but now, on this big day, they've made her favorite lunch and celebration before the transformation begins. It's here that we learn that the plane in the sky at the start of this episode is a part of Kusamayu's big day. Now, as I predicted back in episode 6, that she would and has decided to become a part of the hive mind. She tells her aunt and cousin that she's excited, but sweeping the same spot for a half an hour and the look on her face says otherwise. Is this a look of anticipation? Is this a look of someone who's fearful? Maybe it's both, as she looks confused about the fact that she's about to join and lose her individuality. Now, that same plane that we opened the episode with is now landing, and we see a sealed container is being transferred. It's being handed off like it's a sacred relic, and it's headed straight to Kusamayu's village. Now, back at her village, we see that her aunt is singing to her this soft chant that feels both comforting and eerie as the ritual is about to begin. Now, as the virus arrives, we get our Severance crossover moment here with Kusamayu holding and petting a baby goat, if you know you know, for my Severance fans out there, as they tell her to not be afraid, which she claims that she isn't. As she's now surrounded by her village, whom all proceed to sing that same chant, she asks if this is going to hurt, which they reply by telling her it won't hurt one bit. They promise to never hurt her. Now, as the container opens, we see Kusamayu inhales the virus, and just like the others, there's no pain. She begins to feel its effects, just like everyone else did back in episode 1, and within seconds, Kusamayu is now a part of the others. As her and all the villagers can now move on because she is now one of them and there's no need to occupy this place anymore. Now we watch as she walks away from her old home and from the life that she once knew as an individual, and as she does this, she frees all the animals. All the chickens, the goats, the roosters, but one in particular animal stands out. It's the black and white baby goat, the one that she held onto not too long ago, as it's screaming and it charges towards her, bleeding like it knows something's wrong as she is now gone. That last shot of the baby goat running and screaming was definitely sad to watch, but it's also very symbolic. To me, that goat was the only one of its kind, just like Kusamayu was the only one that was uninfected. And just like that baby goat, Kusamayu was innocent, she was different, she was also loved, and now enjoying the hive, she's lost that uniqueness. Now, back when we first met her in episode 2, she made it clear that she wanted to join her family, and when an opportunity came, she took advantage of it, and it was essentially inevitable. This whole opening scene felt very cultish, but also religious at the same time. It also felt like we were watching someone's baptism and their funeral as she ultimately decided to give up her life to join the others and thinking it was the only and best thing for her to do. It does make me wonder, besides Lexmi and Kumba, what did the others uninfected do with this opportunity? I wonder if they're going to want to stay human by choice, or like Kusamayu, where they eventually fold, and not by force, but from loneliness and wanting to join their loved ones as a part of the collective. Now back at Carol's, we find her and Zosha watching a live drone footage of Manusos, who's about 2 hours away from arriving. Now Zosha and the others plan to not be present when he arrives, as Carol learns that he's considered a danger to the others and Zosha, but not necessarily towards Carol. It is now day 60, hour 16, 40 minutes and 17 seconds, 8 hours after learning that she'll be getting a visitor, and after weeks and months of traveling and almost dying in doing so, Manusos arrives outside of Carol's house as he practices what he's going to say to Carol for the very first time in person. Now, after honking his horn, which, by the way, I wonder what Carol thinks of car horns after what we learned about what she thinks about train horns, as we see Carol opens her front door. From cursing each other out on the phone to this very moment, now face to face after all that time. Now we watch as they reintroduce themselves, and it's met with awkwardness, and it's also met with some tension, but they say they're ready to talk. But first, Carol makes him leave his machete in the ambulance after learning that he may be dangerous. Now Manusos wants to talk in the back of the ambulance, but Carol wants to talk inside her house, as this is just the beginning of their misunderstandings, as we get this great shot of the space, or better yet, the gap between the two characters. Now Carol goes inside to get her phone to use as a translator. But Manuso grabs her phone and he thinks that the others are listening and that they'll hear their plan, and before she can explain why they won't do this, he tosses her phone into the sewer. Now obviously this upsets Carol, and I thought this moment was hilarious as she tells him to leave and her phone is still translating from the sewer as we watch her walk back into her house. Now knowing that didn't work, we see Manusos is going to take a different approach as he gets her phone from the sewer and he's going to compromise. He agrees to not talk in the back of the ambulance and to use her phone to translate, but he's also going to need an umbrella. Now outside of Carol's backyard, behind her fence, they have a conversation. Carol refuses to join him under the umbrella as he believes, as he calls it, the others are being weirdos, have eyes from space that can read their lips. Now they have a back and forth, and Carol insists on going inside the house where he believes the others have bugged her house to spy on her, as he demands privacy, secrecy, and cover, and then we watch as he questions why the others would help. Notice he says that he doesn't see them as humans, as he continues to say, why would they have them join together to destroy the others? He calls them evil and soul takers, and if they can't be fixed, they're better off dead. Definitely some interesting choice of words by Manusos. Now, they disagree on the others being humans, as Carol agrees they are weird, yes, but still humans no less. Now, it's here that he brings the question, why did the others leave her for 40 days but ultimately decide to come back, as Carol lies and says that she doesn't know. Now, clearly she's afraid to say what really happened and how she now is in a relationship with one of them. Carol now feeling the heat from both Manusos and the weather, as she's had enough and heads inside and he follows. Now inside, we watch as he checks around her living room to check to see if there's any spy microphones, as he snaps at Carol to use her phone, and boy, she did not like that. Man, I knew after their first conversation that when they eventually met that there was going to be some awkwardness and some tension and maybe some anxiety between the two, and so far, they have not disappointed. Now, to loosen the tension in the air, we see Carol prepares a drink for the both of them, but Manusos pushes her aside and heads straight towards the liquor cabinet as he finds something hidden in the corner. Carol immediately calls Zosha, questioning if she or one of the others have been spying on her, as she eventually finds out it was a sensor planted by Helen back in 2011 when she froze her eggs. Now we all know that Carol likes to have a drink or two, and so did Helen, and she was the one that planted that sensor to monitor how often Carol drank, and most likely thought, let's hold off on having kids since she has a full control over her drinking. This little moment continues to show us that the woman Carol thought understood her, the woman whose memory that she's been clinging to, and suddenly Carol's starting to realize that Helen didn't necessarily trust her. She maybe also didn't really believe in her. At least not fully. Again, going back to when Carol found out that Helen wasn't necessarily a fan of her books, to now this very moment, Carol is learning a lot about her deceased wife that puts a lot of what Carol thought about her in a much different light. As we watch, she quietly hangs up the phone with Zosha. Now, after all the back and forth and distrust, we see Carol is exhausted and emotionally drained by her visitor as she shows him where he'll be sleeping for the night and is not in her house. As they have to put the saving to the world on hold till tomorrow, we watch as she takes him over to her neighbor's place. Now, initially, he disapproves of staying here at first because, as we know, he doesn't like to take things from others or things that don't belong to him, but we see that he takes it for now. Now, as Carol leaves, we see that Manusos calls the others and requests to speak to the person that she spoke to on the phone moments ago, and that was Zosha. It's now nighttime and Carol's falling asleep to the Golden Girls as she wakes up and she secures the front door just in case Manusos is as dangerous as they think he is. But when she does that, she notices that Zosha's car outside and she runs over to the neighbor's house. We watch as Carol rushes in and learns that Zosha has told him everything, most likely about their relationship, the other's eating source, their ways of communicating with one another, and more importantly, their weaknesses. As Carol grabs Zosha and has them leave immediately as he calls the others yet again and requests they send him another one. Now back at Carol, she learns that Zosha did tell him everything that he wanted to know. Now behind Carol, you can see car lights of one of the others approaching during this conversation as Zosha tells Carol that the others, including herself, loves Manusos just as much as they love Carol. Now Carol doesn't understand. How could the others, including Zosha, love someone who doesn't love them back, who's been avoiding them, who hates them, who wants them all dead? And how could Zosha love him, especially now considering that Carol considers Zosha to be hers? Now, as Carol goes on and on about the things that he said about the others, but also having this level of concern that he knows everything, we see Zosha lays on the floor and apologizes for what's about to happen. Now, Carol's confused because she knows that she didn't yell or get upset with the others, but yet another one of my theories comes true as Zosha goes into a seizure like we saw back in episode 2 as Carol realizes that it's Manuso that is doing this. She runs over to her neighbor's house to find the Manusos next to one of the hive mind members after learning everything from Zosha, and he's basically experimenting on them. Now, Manusos goes to grab his notebook and pulls out his handheld radio and tunes into the channel of 86130, and the sound this time around is much different than before, indicating that a change is happening in the frequency. Now, he heads back inside, and the sound goes back to when we first heard it weeks ago, and the other, who's on the couch, comes to, only for Manusos to yell at him again and sends him back into a seizure, and the frequency changes sounds again. Carol leaves to go get something to stop him after seeing just how dangerous he is and how he can be so dangerous towards the others. Now, of course, while Carol had did this back in episode 2 to the others, we never saw her do it again after learning how many people died when she does this. Now, I would assume that Manusos learned how many people die when they have seizures, but as he'll tell Carol later, he doesn't care because he doesn't see them as humans. As the saying goes, you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, or in this case, you have to kill millions in order to save billions. Now, Manusos goes up to the other's ear, and this person was once known as Rick, as he tells Rick that he knows that the real Rick is still in there inside and he wants to help him. Knowing that he doesn't have much time before the sound waves come back, he continues to essentially wake up the real Rick to return to himself, but Carol returns with a shotgun and shoots above Manuso's head and tells him to back away from Rick. Okay, we gotta talk about this scene. Do you all believe that if Manusos had more time that he could have or would have found a way to get Rick back to himself? Now, this obviously answers the question or the theory that we all had back when we were first introduced to this frequency, that this sound does indeed tie into the hive mind and how they communicate with one another. That was just confirmed. Now, the question is, where exactly is the location of the source of the hive mind? Now, obviously, besides coming from space, is this tied to the antennas from where the astronomers detected the original radio signal from space, or is it somewhere else? Either way, this discovery is huge, and the seeds of the signal being important has been there throughout this entire season, and I would imagine will be very important for Carol and Manusos in season 2, as we'll discuss much later in this breakdown. But let's switch gears, because while Manusos chases control, we see Carol chooses connection. Back at Carol, Zosha awakes but is in a little bit of discomfort as the phone rings. Notice Zosha refers to herself again as we and us after what just happened, but quickly assures Carol that she'll be fine. Carol knows who's on the phone and she still answers it, and it's Lakshmi, who of course is blaming her for what just happened to the others based on their past times of what happened before, when Carol would be the one getting upset.
Screw you too, Lakshmi.
Now, after what just happened, the others, like before, must leave again and distance themselves from Manusos, similar to what they did with Carol when they deemed her to be too dangerous to be around. Man, talk about not meeting your heroes, am I right? This once exciting but dangerous trip to save the world has become a disaster for Manusos and Carol. Now we see that Carol put him in a trunk as she ultimately lets him out. He doesn't feel bad about what he did because, again, he doesn't see them as humans, and what he learned was very valuable in his little experiment. The real work must begin, and he's ready to fix things with Carol, but after last week and after thinking that she might lose Zosha, we see that she's fully turned a new page, and she lets him know that there is plenty of water and power that he can live on as she gets into her car. Now, before pulling off, it's here that we get that Leo meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood moment. As we hear the translation of what the title of this episode means,
do you want to save the world or get the girl?
As Carol drives off to get her girl. Looking back at this decision by Carol, this is it. This is it for Carol. It's no longer about saving the world. It's about saving this new love that she's recently found and cherishing it. Now, as here we flash forward to getting this gorgeous montage of Zosha and Carol traveling around the world. In this, we see them laughing, living, Zosha swimming, they're taking a walk on the beach, and for the very first time, we see Zosha's wearing yellow. As we talked about many times on these breakdowns, that yellow is Carol's color. To me, that color has always represented her individuality. And now, it's theirs that they share. We see them in the tub together, sipping tea, just being no we or us or I, just them with no fear, just enjoying each other's company and enjoying the joy that they're sharing together. These little moments of happiness of Carol enjoying every single second with Zosha has reminded her of the time she shared with Helen, but this time around, she can fully embrace her love without limitations, which makes this the happiest that we've seen her in this entire series. Now to back up a bit, we did get this shot of Carol reading the 1969 novel by the name of The Left Hand of Darkness. Now, I wasn't too familiar with this book, but after looking it up, it's considered by many as a classic science fiction novel. It's about gender, identity, and human connection. Now, as we know at this point in the show, her reading this isn't just some throwaway detail. Carol is trying to understand the hive mind more and making herself feel more connected to them, but also thinking about her being with Zosha as her joining them in a way, and to also keeping this relationship and this connection that she and Zosha has. But even beyond trying to understand the hive mind, I also think this is Carol also trying to understand and to make a connection of how she can exist without losing herself. Can she be a part of something greater? Can she still be Carol? Now we arrive at this ski location, which almost reminded me where we found Carol and Helen on their ice trip in Norway, and similar to that time, despite all the joy and happiness, we find Carol isn't 100% happy. Despite the connection, despite Zosha being by her side, Carol is still searching, still questioning. Now, you'll also notice that Carol is now wearing blue, which happens to be the color that we've seen the others wear throughout the most of this season, and even the color of the car that Zosha drove. A subtle yet powerful visual cue that Carol is changing and she's aligning. Now, Zosha can sense that something's bothering Carol. Now, Carol quickly switches topics and wants to know about the unjoined Zosha's romantic past, as she learns that whoever that person was has passed at some point. I do wonder if unjoined Zosha was romantically involved with a male or a female. Now, earlier I had mentioned Severance, which again, one of my favorite shows of all time, and if you guys aren't watching that, what are you doing? But as I digress, I had mentioned Severance earlier, and this question made me think about Irving and his relationship with Bert, and if the unsevered Irv was ever in a romantic relationship with a man before severed Irv was with Bert. Now, Carol mentions to Zosha that she struggles with feeling happy like the others and asks Zosha what makes a person happy as we watch Zosha rattles off some scientific facts about what makes a person happy. Now, Carol explains the feeling that she has about this happiness with Zosha coming and going, but ultimately she admits to never wanting it to end, but here is where Zosha tells her that it'll only get better. Now, as Carol alluded to last week, and we spoke about this in last week's breakdown, while spending all this time with Carol probably came from a place of love and affection from the others in Zosha, at the same time, they were basically distracting her from the fact that they were still working on a way to change her into one of them, as the weeks-long theory that we've discussed now comes into fruition. Taking a look at Carol's face in this moment is a look of a person that feels defeated and is devastated, as we see this moment of betrayal on her face, and she thought that she was being seen, that she thought she was being loved, but instead she was being studied, she was being prepared, just like the scene from last week's episode at the diner. as she now knows that the others have her eggs, and with them, they can now extract the stem cells to complete the transformation. Now, Zosha tries to explain why they have to share this gift with her and the others that are uninfected, as she also tells her that Kushimayu just joined them, which lets us know as far as time goes that this is taking place at the same time at the start of this episode, and that this mini trip between Carol and Zosha was about 10 days long. Now, Carol learns that it'll take a month at the earliest and no more than 2 to 3 months at the latest to complete this task and changing Carol into one of them. This is where the romantic happy illusion comes to an end, as Carol realizes that the others will forever be there to protect her, but they'll also be there to want her to join them no matter what she does or says. You know, thinking about Carol and her struggles throughout this season, I know there's a lot of people that don't really necessarily care for Carol. They don't really have a emotional attachment to the character. Me, I'm the complete opposite. Like, I've really enjoyed this journey, but I think even the people that don't like Carol has to feel something for her in this moment. Like, you guys have to have some emotional weight on how devastating that had to be for Carol. Let me know how you all felt about that moment in the comments below. As we come to the end of this episode and this finale of season 1, it is now day 74, hour 18, 30 minutes and 23 seconds. 4 days after learning her time with Zosha came with a hidden agenda, we find Manuso still working hard at figuring out how to fix things. He's been doing some research on electromagnetics, crystallology, radio signals, learning what he can and studying all the things tied to the radio signal. Now, we see him taking notes on electric flow and reading about standing waves, which by definition is a vibration of a system in which some particular points remain fixed, while others between them vibrate with a maximum amplitude. Now, in his research, it describes it by mentioning antennas and radio frequency generators or transmitters, and how at a certain points, if separated by distance, the output would be affected and reduced to zero. Now, in layman terms, I would assume that this all means that the further you're away from the main source, as we saw, or you disrupt the source, as we saw in this episode with Rick, in theory, I would believe that Manusos believes that he can get the original person out of the hive mind if they're separated from that main radio source. Now, as he writes down loop equals circuit, he hears a helicopter approaching. As it starts to land, we see that it's Zosha and Carol as a large container is being placed in front of Carol's driveway. You know, seeing this moment is kind of ironic. Last we saw Zosha flying, it was for her meeting Carol for the first time. But as we are now in the finale, she's dropping her off, and this may be the last time, or at least the last time she's going to see Carol for a very long time. Now, before leaving the helicopter, there are no words between the two, but a look that says more than words can express, as they both know that this is it, and the last time there will be trust from Carol. And I feel like at the very least that Carol wished that things could have been different, and who knows, maybe deep down Zosha and the others wish the same. Now, bringing up our color theory conversation again, I think the fact that Carol is wearing mostly black speaks to her current mindset. Knowing how important color is to this show, black can represent mourning, darkness, self-control, discipline, independence, and a strong will, and giving an impression of authority and power. In this case, this is Carol regaining all that, but also mourning the loss of the others in Zosha. As Carol watches Zosha leave, she takes a deep breath and looks at Manusos and tells him that he won and she'll now help him in saving the world. As she walks inside, we see Manusos ask her what's inside the container, as we get this great call back to the conversation that Carol had with the DHL guy, as she tells him that it's an atom bomb. And as we see, the camera pans up, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last shot in the very end of season 1 of Pluribus. Yep, a whole ass nuclear weapon is now in front of Carol's house and next to the most dangerous person in Manusos. Now, do I think Carol wants to actually use this? Not necessarily, but maybe. But deep down, I personally feel this is more of a sign for her saying to the others to never return, or else she might be willing to use it. Which, speaking of using it, I mean, hell, she might use the atomic bomb to blow up a whole state of others to send them a message, or she might use it to blow up their giant antenna that they want to use to send out the signal to everyone across the universe. Now, let's talk about this finale, because there was a lot to take away from this finale, and for me, it's mostly positive. First thing I want to mention is seeing Manuso sharing scenes with Carol and Zosha was fantastic. The fact that they all have different personalities, obviously, and different perspectives, and they come from different journeys and walks of life, their particular scenes were just so unique to me. Now, the moments between Manusos and Carol may have been my favorite parts in this finale. Their back and forth and the tension and distrust that they had with one another, and seeing Carol telling him that he won at the end and now wants to join him was such an earned moment for me. And speaking of Carol, I shared my prediction last week and it basically came true, but I still love seeing it and how it was all executed. From her being on the other side at the beginning and calling them human and leaving humanity alone, and then to spend that time with Zosha and feeling more and more in love with her. But then her finding out about her eggs and being brought back down to square one and wanting to save the world was such a great full circle arc for her in this episode and for her throughout this season. Now, if I had one major issue with this finale is that, selfishly, I wish we had more scenes between the actors and more scenes between Zosha and Manusos and actually seeing the conversation between the two. I also would have loved to have seen Carol demanding that they get her that atom bomb and watching them get the atom bomb and Carol not changing her mind about it. Other than that, the worst part for me in this finale is the fact that the show has officially come to an end. And based on a recent interview I saw with Vince Gilligan and the other writers and creators of the show, I don't know, guys. It sounds like we might have to wait at least 3 years between this season and next. Now, to be clear, I always prefer for creators, writers, directors, storytellers to have as much time as possible to make the best story as possible. But if I'm being honest with you all, at the same time, I feel like he's had so much time from when this show was originated and conceived to when season 1 writer's room came together and to we get this very finale. I feel like there was enough time for them to come up with the storyboards, come up with actual stories for season 2 to be complete as far as the writers are concerned. And again, based on the interview I saw, it sounded like there's going to be a possible 2026 shoot date. And at the earliest, especially knowing the scope and scale, even though this doesn't have like a big cast, but we know how much they use different locations across the world, and this is a pretty big show, I would imagine maybe at the earliest we'll get this show maybe late 2027 or as early as the early parts of 2028. I don't know, guys. We might have to wait a while before we get season 2. Which, speaking of season 2, I would imagine that we'll get a lot more of Carol and Manusos working together and maybe more from the other uninfected characters in the show and seeing how the others will try to prevent them from changing them. Of course, I anticipate us getting more information about the radio signal, us learning more about the, I'm assuming, aliens that set up the original signal. So I would anticipate we'll get more answers and also probably some other cool cameos, not just John Cena, but again, maybe we'll get some characters from the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul universe that makes their way into the show when it comes to season 2. Now, as far as the season goes, overall, I've said this throughout the 9 weeks, but I really enjoyed this show with little to no major issues along the way. I loved how each episode was essentially its own genre in a way, and I also really enjoyed the self-awareness of the show. Like, it never got too serious, it never got too dark. It reminded itself to add in some moments of levity between these more heavy topics that the show did cover. Now, I do wish that we could have recaptured or at least had more episodes that felt like episode 1 because I'm such a lover of science fiction and horror, and that first episode was just perfect to me, and I wish we could have recaptured that type of genre and that type of emotion and the stakes that first episode had. But besides that, this was easily one of my favorite shows of this year. From the writing, the acting from everyone, including our main 3 characters, and especially our main lead with Rhea Seehorn, who really got to show off her acting abilities in this show. Manusos was fantastic. I really enjoyed how he was included in this back half of the season. I'm really excited to see more of him. I love Zosha. The actress is so phenomenal. Her personality, the little moments of humanity that she let come out was beautiful to watch between her and Carol. Which, speaking of Carol, her own personal journey from the world's most miserable person to the world's most loneliest person to finding love to where she ended was just so compelling these past 9 weeks. Again, from the productional value, the use of color, the moments of silence, and the science to tell a deeply human story about connection, identity, and the cost of belonging, this show to me did not disappoint. Now, I've addressed the pacing issues before, but again, I leaned into the character-driven approach, and I love the more existential questions that the show poses each and every week in putting us as an audience into the shoes of our main character, Carol. Again, I didn't think this was a perfect show. It wasn't flawless. It's not my favorite show of the year. But with all that being said, I found it to be one of the better experiences that I had with a new show all year. And again, it will be in my top 10 of the year. But with all that said, to all my viewers and listeners out there, we have come to the end of this breakdown of season 1 finale of Pluribus. But now the $1 million question is, what did you all think? Number 1, what did you all think about the finale? What worked, what didn't work, what were some deeper meanings, some different understandings that you all had at certain moments? What was your favorite moment, your least favorite moment? What were some of your theories that came true, other theories that didn't come true? What do you all hope to see in the future as far as season 2? When do you all think we'll get season 2? And also just share your general thoughts about the season, favorite episodes, favorite character. What were some glaring issues you all had throughout the 9 episodes? What was the best thing about this show as a whole? Is this one of your favorite shows of the year? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Again, I want to thank you all for listening or watching this week's breakdown. I have had such an incredible time covering this show this past 9 weeks. It has been such an awesome experience, not only experiencing this show, but also reading you all's comments, you all supporting these videos, watching them, sharing them, all that great stuff does not go unnoticed on my end. So I do thank you all for the 9 weeks. We will be back. It's the end of the year, but we will have many things to look forward to in the new year. But before we wrap this thing up, to let me know that you all support the channel, support me as a creator, and you all are still listening or watching, this week's special word to put in the comments right now is #YouWin. Now, if you all enjoyed my breakdown, not only for this individual episode, but for the past 9 weeks, let me know by liking this video. And if you're watching this on YouTube, when you all hit the like button, there is a hype button, which will allow this video to come across some new viewers. Now, speaking of new viewers, if you all can do me a favor, hit the share button, man. It goes a long way. Share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. And last but not least, even though this is the end of the road for Pluribus, stick around by subscribing to the channel today. We will be having some top 10 lists coming out soon. My favorite shows of the year, favorite movies of the year, favorite horror movies, superhero movies, what I'm looking forward to coming in the new year, and so many more things to come. So if that sounds like something you all will enjoy, like I said, stick around by subscribing to the channel today. Now, for all my podcast listeners out there, I appreciate you all. Do me a favor. Let me know your thoughts about everything we discussed in the comments section. Also, can you all consider sticking around by subscribing to the podcast, leaving me a like and a review? I would greatly appreciate the support. Alrighty, y'all, we have come to the end, so remember, you all are awesome. Stay safe out there, have a happy holidays, and also remember, never leave the baby goats behind. Alrighty, y'all, I'll see you again soon.